Most native societies thought 7 generations ahead. Well, we don't think even 1 generation ahead. We cannot afford to know this and ignore it. I spent my whole life studying everything that we have to be aware of to be healthy people, which is utterly dependent on this planet, and is utterly dependent on our food supply, and it's utterly dependent on our water and our air. We can come back to wholeness, and the question is, how much pain is it going to take before we wake up to our potential as souls? There's only 2 forces that create everything in the universe, and if they're out of balance, your universe is out of balance. I'm going to show you a technique that I developed that anybody can do that will help you clear your mind up and live your dream beautifully. I think you're going to love this. It can be daunting. Many of my students with tears in their eyes often say, Paul, how do I even begin to tackle any of this stuff? It's so great. Every single soul carries a piece of the grand puzzle if you just do what you love to do with the intention of bringing awareness to the things that are most important. The world would change rapidly.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Know Thyself. Our guest today is a world-renowned expert over many different disciplines. He's an OG. I've been studying this man's work for many, many years now, and it's because he's cultivated mastery in so many disparate fields and fields of study and experience in life that I feel like he's able to communicate so effectively and really show how dynamic the awakening process is. He's a founder of Chek Institute and Spirit Gym, which teaches the science of living well and self-actualization, mind, body, spirit. Paul Chek, thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's a great pleasure. Thank you. It's kind of surreal to be here because I've watched a number of your podcasts and I've always really enjoyed them, and I enjoy your presence. I can always feel you in your center, and so it was nice to share Tai Chi with you and see your beautiful home here. It's really gorgeous. So not a bad place to drive a few hours to get to.
Thank you so much for coming out. I really enjoyed just catching up a little bit beforehand and then doing the Tai Chi, which was nice out by the pond. And
yes.
Thanks for that. You gave me that Tai Chi ruler, which
yes.
I'm going to start practicing. Felt amazing.
Yeah. It's, that's the lineage of Master Fong Ha. So may his spirit be with you.
How I want to start this conversation is kind of like a bird's eye view, macro view of the perspective that our life in this plane of existence is very much like an earth school or a spirit,
it totally is,
or like a spirit gym.
It is a spirit gym.
So I think that sets up the framework for the conversation, which is going to be diving into the many different aspects of our physical, mental, spiritual awakening and actualization process. But how do you perceive this human experience as kind of earth school for us?
Well, I think, there's many ways to look at it, but the way I perceive it, for me, you have to start at the beginning, which is what some people would call God. Others may not like that word. It has many different meanings, and maybe we can talk about the definitions that I give those words so that it's not confusing. But if we just consider source as the absolute or the unknowable, source is frequently referred to in religions as unconditional love. And if you do what I've done and even talk to atheists about this and say, well, if there was a God and God was love, what type of love would it be? Would it be sex and violence love, like the love that a child experiences by coming by way of an act of sex, because all creation is an act of sex? But the child has to learn to deal with gravity. It has to learn to deal with sharp things, fire, dogs that bite. It finds out you can't just pull on its whiskers without a reaction. So the period of coming into a body for the soul is quite, violent in a sense compared to being one with all that is. Or would it be conditional love, which I classify as I love you if, I love you and, I love you but, or I love you if you. And we as children learn that we have to get clear on what are the conditions that allow us to feel love. And if you don't get clear on it as a child, when you start dating and having more deeply personal relationships, you realize there's certain things that just don't feel loving to you. Even though the other might tell you, like I remember my father saying, words like, I'm going to whip you because I love you. And well, to me, that was very confusing, right? That was sex and violence, love with conditions, and I didn't find it attractive at all. Or would God be empathetic and compassionate love? And that's a very, very high form of love. I think that's really quite godly. And I believe love is the verb of God, which is very important. Or would God be unconditional love? And I've never had a single person, no matter what their philosophical orientation was, atheist or otherwise, say, well, if God was God, then it would be unconditional love. And so I say, well, if we're all here living in a field of conditions, then we have to ask ourselves, how does God go from being unconditional to creating all these conditions? And that was a question that plagued me for a long time. So as I always do, I went deep into meditation and connected to my soul and spent time really asking my soul to connect me to source consciousness. And I asked, why all the death? Why all the evil? Why all the pain? Why all the conditions? Because if you're unconditional love, how did all this get here? And the answer I got back really was very classic of what I get when I connect to source consciousness. It was, I create conditions so that I can love myself unconditionally. And when you realize that consciousness is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites, you can't become conscious of or make meaning of anything without a subject-object duality. So to say, well, how does this happen? Well, then, because God is source, I use the symbol 0 for that, because you can't define God as any number, or you're objectifying God, which means you have an idea, not God. I meditated for years and asked for help with that and did a lot of study, and what I came to the conclusion was God does not think itself into existence. God dreams itself into existence. And we can dream when we're unconscious. We can dream when we're sound asleep, and we can have dreams that are so profound that you can orgasm in a dream. You can be scared to death in a dream. You can wake up from an experience that's so vivid it seems more real than your waking life. And so what I found to take a lot of steps and synthesize them down is that God dreams it. So if you use the alchemical model, which starts with fire, which is the dreaming nature of God, but the emptiness of God creates the desire which leads to the dreaming. And God has only one mission, is to know thyself, Andre. Isn't that just quite amazing? Because there is nothing else. God, by definition, is that for which there is no other. And because of that, God is terribly alone. And I've had profound experiences of being one with God, and the aloneness was so intense that it left me in tears for hours and hours, like just really deep, deep aloneness. And so I realized that God dreams characters into existence, which is the myth of Shiva and Shakti and Shiva, as one example. And so if you follow the alchemical model, you've got fire at the top, which is the dreaming nature of God. It's the desire to experience itself. And so what happens is you have God dreaming all these characters into existence, which are really expressions of itself. So we can use the Tantra model. The feminine of God, the emptiness of God is the desire, but it's also source energy and source consciousness. And Shakti represents God's desire, and she's got this emptiness inside of her, which is the womb, and she wants a partner, a lover, a consort, and a friend, which becomes Shiva, and that becomes the first step of manifestation. So because the subject of Shakti is God as subject, dreaming itself into existence, and Shakti's subject, through which she dreams Shiva, Shiva becomes the beloved, and she's the lover, she's the subject, he's the object. So once you have love, which is the basis of relationship, now you have 2 points of sentience, Shakti and Shiva, and this is, of course, metaphor, and they begin to recognize each other, and that begins the relationship, and that is the flow of energy and information between 2 points of sentience. And that's the basis of mind. So once you have love and relationship and you have the flow of energy and information, now you're at the air element. So fire steps itself to air. And for those listening, it's important to remember that in alchemy, the words earth, water, fire, and air are not only referring to the objects or the material existences, they're referring to ranges of vibration. So fire would be the realm of spirit, something that's moving so fast you cannot measure it. It's infinitely fast. It would be the non-local domain, or the implicate order of David Bohm. And then you have that stepping down into water. The water element is the domain of connection and the flow of feelings and emotions, and this is where we get our sense of value. And, there's a lot of, if you look at creation myths from all over the world, most of them begin with some kind of chaos and water. And so you step down into the water element, and then the step down from the water element into the earth element is any form of embodiment. So anything that has any solidity to it, an example is you can take an ice cube, which is solid. So it actually, in alchemy, is the earth element. But you heat it up, it becomes water because it turns to liquid. Anything liquid is the water element. If you heat it up enough, it becomes atmosphere, the air element. You heat it up enough, it'll become plasma. And if you had enough power, you could ignite it and turn it back into the fire element. So you see that these elements are always becoming one another. So because God really wants to experience individuality, because without individuality, there is no way to have love. There is no way to have relationship. So the earth is one of probably potentially infinite places within the dreaming nature of God. If you said, okay, well, how many planets could there be? Even if you had a one universe model, I've seen estimates that say even within the Milky Way galaxy, there'd be about 3 billion suns like ours with planets that could be like ours. And this has been looked into by many mystics. And I referred to them in my Spirit Gym book. So what you're seeing is that God is actually wanting to have an experience, and the more material you get in that experience, the more of a sense of tangible separation you have. So it creates this amazing illusion of separation. But as you know, what's looking through your eyes at me is ultimately what's looking through my eyes at you, right? And this is why when people used to say to St. Francis of Assisi, one of the most common questions he got asked was, how do I find God? And he would say, what you are looking for is what's looking. And if you really meditate on that, it's a fast route to at least an intellectual awakening. And so really the alchemists say that God, which they use the word the dragon in some schools of alchemy, like the Taoists do, is in everything, in the rocks and the stones and the trees and the veins of metal and everything. And that the process of spiritual evolution is to extract spirit from matter. And the process of extracting spirit from matter is a spiritual developmental process. So someone who's very encased in matter would have a very materialistic view of life. As someone becomes more and more aware of things like out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, remote viewing, active imagination, they become very conscious that who and what they are is not matter-bound. But the body is kind of like a cocoon where we go through this metamorphosis, and the world is really like a cocoon or an egg or a petri dish where souls come into this garden of souls, and they inhabit material forms where they have this very distinct sense of separation, which really gives you a very tangible experience of love because there's a very definite I, thou. As the soul evolves and you become more and more spiritually awake, I define spirituality as a progressive connection to a greater whole. So there comes a time where I can be very, very conscious of the fact that I'm looking at the Andre of me and you're looking at the Paul of you. And that each of us is actually the same being, but each of us has this undeniable uniqueness within which source or God or spirit is trying one unique potential, which is 100% novel and will never be repeated again. And so the earth, to me, is a garden of souls, and it is a place where most of the souls here are still awakening to the fact that they've taken on a material form. Plotinus says something very true and quite profound. He says the soul's greatest addiction is to matter. And the reason is because only God can give a soul, and God, being unconditional love by nature, the soul can't see itself. And, for example, if you were invisible and you went to try to brush your teeth in the mirror, you wouldn't see yourself and you wouldn't know where your teeth were. So Plotinus says that the soul gets so enamored with its body and says, it says, I am, look at this, this is cool. And it falls so in love with this material existence, but it doesn't realize that the deeper it goes into a material existence, the more asleep it gets, because spirit has to be entangled. Matter is spirit moving slowly enough that you can interact with it. So it gets kind of drunk on matter, and that begins the necessary process of creating the resistance that is the basis of what I call spirit gym, which is where you slowly wake up. And, when you're repeatedly doing things that are not supportive of the soul's urges or desires for manifesting its unique genius in this plane, then the pain teacher comes to visit you. So many people say, I have a very hard time connecting with my soul because I've been teaching people how to do that for years. But some people are so locked up inside, either bad diet, bad lifestyle, unhealed traumas, fear, etc. So I say, look, your soul's always talking to you. So the first thing to do, if you want to hear what your soul's saying, is pay attention to where you're dealing with challenges in your life, where you got pain in your body, where you have sadness, where you have fear, because your soul is showing you what you're creating. So if you use any of those as doorways, you will get through the veils of yourself. And as you, deal with your mommy and daddy issues, you'll unlock that libido and you'll have more energy to create with. And as long as you have a dream that gives you enough levity to overcome the gravity of your life, then you will be in a labor of love, and it'll lift you up progressively. And eventually you'll get to the point where, doing things like spending time in nature, meditating, breathing classes, the many, many ways, you progressively begin to see that the world is actually this most beautiful garden in which we go from the mineral soul of Steiner's model to the biological soul. Then we develop an intellectual soul. Then we develop an awareness soul, which Steiner says begins when you first begin honestly asking the question, is it really true? Is it really true that God will burn you in hell? Is it really true that there is no such thing as God? Is it really true that I'll never have abundance in my life? Is it really true that nobody loves me? And to the degree that you honestly pursue answering the question, is it really true? You turn on the awareness soul, so the soul begins to climb up out of the matter. But we also have to remember, in alchemy, we deal with allegory, we deal with analogy, and we deal with matter not only as physical matter, but we deal with the same matter we're talking about when you say, what's the matter with you to somebody? Because that matter can be as entangling to the soul as physical matter. So by asking the question, is it really true? You are actually dealing with the other type of matter that is largely mental, but equally solidified in people. And then you grow from the awareness soul to the creative soul, because as you unlock all this libido that's trapped in all this isolation, fear, and material existence, you have all this energy coming up, which would be very much like Kundalini rising in yoga. And you start to actually realize what love is, and you start to feel what love is. You feel love when you eat your food. You feel love when you walk through nature. You feel love in your breath. You feel love in the stars and the sunlight and the moonlight. And so this natural creativity begins to come out of you, and you begin to naturally have greater intuition and inner vision, and you can more naturally think outside of the box. You can start to really see how caged people are in belief systems and rigid ideas, and you're so naturally creative because this life force wants to climb out of matter. It's really the consciousness that makes matter is God consciousness. So as you disentangle it, you become more and more, shall we say, God-like. You become more expansive and less limited and more free. Then the intuitive soul comes online. And so intuition, there's 4 functions of consciousness in Jungian psychology: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Thinking tells you what something means. Feeling is related to your values and the emotions attached to values. Sensation is what tells you what something is. This is hard or soft or wet. And intuition is the only one that can go beyond those other 3 functions, and intuition is drawing from wholeness. So we have to have access to our right brain. And in our culture that's so left brain, many people don't have access to intuition, not because it's not there, but because their mailbox is so full that when an intuitive insight comes in, they can't find it amidst all the mail. So this is why spiritual practices that, progressively bring you into states of emptiness, I call that leaving the mailbox open. Like, most of my work is governed by my soul. So I have to have periods throughout the day where I empty myself so that I can see what the mailman wants to deliver, which is always a response to our deepest intention. And then you ultimately reach the point which the alchemists also identified, which is what Steiner calls spirit-soul union. And so that's when the part of you that is seemingly self, seemingly individual, seemingly separate, meets the part of you that is actually Christ or cosmic consciousness, and the 2 of them come together, and the male and it's also the male and the female energies, the feminine and the masculine, and all of a sudden you begin to have experiences of complete unity, not only with all that is, but beyond that. And, from my own experience of, 18 years of Tai Chi, being a meditator since I was 12, trained by the monks of the Self-Realization Fellowship. In fact, I went to the lake shrine not far from here for my 15th summer and spent, 2 or 3 weeks working with the monks, where I learned a lot that really gave me a foundation, which I wouldn't have made it through my life without it. And so you can begin having these profound experiences that go beyond even a samadhi or a union experience with all that is to, and through Tai Chi, I broke through into very profound non-dual experiences where some of them where I became pure awareness, but some of them went even beyond that to where there was absolutely no thing. And in fact, I didn't even know I was alive. I didn't know who I was. I don't really have words to describe it, but you go to this place where you could say it's unconditional and there's not a thought. There's nothing. In fact, I'll tell you real quickly about one of the experiences I had. I'd probably been doing Tai Chi for about 14 or 15 years when this happened. And at that time, I was coming home at night. I'd spent a year doing Egyptian sun gazing as well. And I was also a vegetarian at the time. And I did the Tai Chi ruler practice quite consistently. I did it every day for 18 years, sometimes twice a day. And on this particular day, I got home at about 5:30, maybe. The sun was going down, and it was the heat was dropping. And I started doing my normal Tai Chi practice, just like you and I did. And the next thing I know, Angie, my second wife, came down into the garden. She says, "Paul, we've been calling you for over an hour for dinner. What are you doing?" And I was high as a kite. I was like I was on 5 hits of LSD. And I mean, I was, of course, straight as ever, but I was just blissed out to the max. But somehow, Andre, my body was doing that Tai Chi, and I went into a state where there was not a Paul, there was not a thought, there was not an awareness, I don't have words for it. It was an abyss of emptiness. And my body was doing that rhythmic Tai Chi for an hour and 40 minutes. when I looked at the clock, because I looked at the clock right when I started. I'd been out there for an hour and 40 minutes, and it felt like I just started. I had no sense of time whatsoever. And I've had many experiences like that in plant medicines, but they're very different on plant medicines because of the nature of the plant medicine. So that's the long, short answer to, Earth School. Earth School is really where God wants to have a very real experience of individuation. And that function is so that love can be experienced, so that I can say, I love you, and know that I am sending love to a person, place, or thing. And on that note, I will say I define love as the flow of energy and information through empathic and compassionate connection to self or other. Because when we say we love someone, we are sending them energy, it's information, and it's empathy to feel, and it's compassion to understand, to self or other. And I think that's the only way God can deal with its primordial aloneness, is to dream love into existence, which requires lovers and beloveds. So Earth School is where you come to learn to love and know thyself.
The podcast could be over right now and I'd be satisfied. That was an amazing answer, very thorough. And I want to just zoom in a little bit on the individual personal process, right? If Source differentiates itself into all these different experiences through the gifts, the positive, the negative polarity, the challenges. We are providing the universe, God, life, whatever word you want to use there, a unique experience to know itself in that way. And this process of becoming whole unto oneself, as you refer to, of individuation.
Yes.
I saw this quote that you had in Spirit Gym as I was preparing for this that I loved, that said, from Alden Nolan, "The day the child realizes that all adults are imperfect, he becomes an adolescent. The day he forgives them, he becomes an adult. The day he forgives himself, he becomes wise."
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
Isn't that just bullseye true? When I came across that quote, I said, I'd have never heard this guy's name before, but he's a wise man.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
Because you can look back on your own life and see right where you're at with that very simple model.
Yeah. So as we start to understand and unveil the different layers of the mind, from our conscious ego structure to the pre-conscious and subconscious layers to the deep well of unconscious, both individual and collective, we start to see, and I just think this framework is so helpful to see where you're at on your own evolutionary process and how you're perceiving what's coming into your life, how it's happening for you and not just to you.
Yes.
Going from victimhood to creator consciousness. Definitely excited to go in your personal journey and process with this as well. And so I would love for you to share your thought process around breaking those different layers of the iceberg, so to speak.
You mean the structures of consciousness? Well, there's a lot of different models. I use Gebser's model, which is one of the ones Ken Wilber refers to a lot, but I read Ever-Present Origin by Gene Gebser, which is a big, big read, and it's deep. And then I use Arthur M. Young's model because I think Arthur Young's model is very easy to apply to a human life. There's, Ken Wilber's model. There's loads of models out there. There's I, we, world, cosmo, and then, beyond cosmo to complete union, which you could call Christ consciousness. So really, we come into the world and we have this, I'll use Gebser's model. When you look at the fetus in the womb, it recapitulates the entire evolution of species on the planet. You start off as a single cell, it divides, and at times the fetus looks like sea creatures. Sometimes it looks like a reptile, sometimes it looks like a bird. So it's about the first 18 to 20 days you can watch it going through all these transformations that literally doesn't look like human at all. And so we see this model being recapitulated. And as a side note, what they call junk DNA, from my investigation, is our genetic history as souls evolving through the entire kingdom of nature. Yogananda says in his teachings it takes about 6 billion reincarnations through nature, the kingdom of nature, to get your first human body. So I believe that the junk DNA is actually the genetic code, because we're built out of all that. We are made out of all that. We're sort of like the evolutionary tip of the sword of nature on this planet. And so in Gebser's model, that sort of proto-human existence is the archaic level of consciousness. And then you go from there into the magic level of consciousness, which relates to the period of time in which we were living in a fusion with nature. And the magic level of consciousness is very, very shamanic. For example, if you investigate how it is that shaman figured out how to make ayahuasca, or how they knew which plants to use for healing ceremonies or psychedelic ceremonies, or how medicine men knew how to combine different herbs. I mean, thousands of years ago, there wasn't any, pharmacist to go to. They'll all say the same thing. The plants taught me. So what you find out is, because we have all these genes in us, when we direct our consciousness to a plant or to a creature or to a stone, we go into sympathetic resonance with it. And that frequency of consciousness that is broadcasting out everything on the planet has an aura, even a stone. So it's sending out subtle energy and we're receiving it. And so we're actually going into sympathetic resonance. And because we have all those genes inside of us, our soul takes that information and converts it into thoughts in our own mind that guide us. So the magic level of consciousness is very, very important. And interestingly, Gebser noted that when he looked at rock art and cave art from that period, which is, 80, 100,000 years ago and before, you did not see mouths on human beings. They drew human beings with no mouths. And so the conclusion is that it was much more important to listen to survive in nature than it was to speak. And so what is it when we're talking to God? It's mostly listening. What is it when you're a mother who's got a child that cannot yet speak, but you sense that it needs something? It's a deep listening. When I am building things out of stone, I connect to the stones and I ask my soul to link me up to the consciousness, and they guide me. And people think I'm weird, but it's just because they've lost touch with magic level of consciousness. I've made countless plant medicines. I'm an alchemist. I use this level of consciousness all the time. I talk to the plants in my house and they guide me and tell me things. They tell me when they're thirsty or when they need more fertilizer. I talk to trees. I've taught thousands of students to do this. I've done countless times. I've taken patients, for example, to Paramahansa Yogananda's Encinitas temple, right on the beach there, the Encinitas, where he's got this beautiful botanical garden with, wildly vast plants from trees from all over the world. I say, okay, you've got, say, adrenal fatigue. Let's go to Yogananda's garden here. I'm going to have you touch this plant, and I want you to just empty yourself and feel what it's doing to your body. And you're going to find one or more of these plants is actually going to put an energy into you that's actually going to make you feel more whole, more stable. And you'll see things like headaches disappearing, like breathing all of a sudden freeing up, small intestine challenges, all of a sudden the guts relax. And so you'll find, first of all, that the plants are very, very conscious of us, and they actually feel sorry for us. They're like, I'll tell you an example of this magic consciousness. I was one time taking J.P. Sears actually out for a hike in the hills behind our house in Vista, which had like a 5 mile, a big area that was, you couldn't build on it. So it was like a nature preserve. And I just had the urge to say hello to, all the plant life there. So I grabbed a hold of one of the shrubs and just said hello. I just wanted to say thank you for all the love and all the beauty you give us all. And the plant said to me, wow, it's so nice to talk to somebody who is awake. Where are all the rest of you? And I said, what do you mean by the rest of us? They said, well, a while back, all the people that lived here talked to us all the time. And I said, oh, are you talking about the Indians that used to live here? They said, yes, they moved through here, they lived here, and they talked to us all the time. And now nobody talks to us. And so I, explained in brief, this is what happened to human beings. And they say, well, that must be why they keep wanting to kill us, because they didn't used to do that to us. We used to have relationships with them. So there is an example of the plant kingdom saying to a human being, where are the rest of you that can talk to us? And, why are you so brutal to all of us? And so here we are going from the archaic level, which is sort of the evolution of man, to become to the point where it actually is aware that it's aware. Homo sapiens sapiens, I'm aware that I'm aware kind of thing. And then we get to this fusion in nature where we have to listen to survive. And then we go to the mythic level, and that's when mouths started showing up on ancient art and cave art. And that's the beginning of telling stories to each other to try to explain the mysteries of life, like what is lightning? Why are all of a sudden the earth is shaking and things are falling down? Why do we see these strange things happening in the sky? Why is the sun this amazing bright thing that seems to have these cycles? And why does the moon seem to affect so much on the planet? So myths were really attempts to explain the unexplainable, and myths were also codes of how to understand the process from birth to childhood, to adulthood, to old age, and understand death. And so all the myths were actually taught by the elders to the younger people to help them understand the process you're going to be going through as a human being. Myths dealt with proprietaries and improprietaries, because without that understanding, you would cease to exist. You'd either kill each other off, or you would act in ways towards other people that would make them want to kill you. The myths had to create a sense of magic, mystery, and awe for the experience of life, or you would start destroying it. So myths actually became ways that we tried to communicate with these forces, which we gave the names of gods because we didn't know how else to relate to them. And they were stories that told us what was happening, and stories about how to live life and what would happen if you did certain things. For example, if you capture somebody in a war, what are you allowed to do and not do? And they were very aware that if you went too far, then they would do that to you if they captured you. So there was these, shall we say, moral codes of conduct, moral being a code of conduct that's life affirmative, versus an ethic, which is a code of conduct that may not be life affirmative. As a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, I had a soldier's manual, about 490 pages of all the things that you do in battle, and what the enemy looks like, and what their weapons look like, and what you do and do not do if you capture an enemy. That's an ethical code, but it's really a myth, right? And so then we emerge to the mental level, which is what we're trapped in now, but coming out of. And in the mental level, you begin to worship ideas as more powerful than anything else. And it's a very dangerous level, because you begin to deify ideas whether or not they're congruent with reality. And so here you see, for example, we're falling in love with virtual realities. And that's causing a real problem, because the further you go into an additional virtual reality, the less time and awareness you put into the one that keeps you alive, which is why I define reality two ways. Reality is what's happening right now. This is reality. But reality is also everything that supports your ability to stay alive. So to the degree that you get trapped in the mental world and you start worshiping ideas that are antagonistic to paying attention to what keeps you alive, you can die death by ideas. And this is exactly where we're at right now. In Gebser's model, the final stage is the integral stage, which we're coming into right now. And he talks about the fact that when the integral stage comes on, it can be quite disorienting. He describes the fact that time takes on different natures. that there can be convergent timelines all happening at once. He says reality becomes diaphanous, which means see-through, opaque, like you can see through it into other dimensions. And we have a lot of people experiencing that. And we're in our third big wave of psychedelic use, which makes people much more aware of that we're in a multidimensional reality. But in the integral age, when we finally get out of the mental, we will merge into this awareness that we are multidimensional beings. And we will see the alchemist model was very real, and we will be able to identify, wow, we really got lost in that materialism. We almost wiped ourselves out because we forgot about everything that was important. We forgot everything is spirit, cloaking itself in matter, and that matter itself is spirit. And we lost touch with what Ken Wilber would call the interiors, or the upper left personal interior and the lower left collective interior dimensions, which is the dimension of soul and spirit, for God's sakes, which is what the magical level was all about, right? There you were very in your interior dimension, and everything in the world was alive. It was animated, right? So there's where you have animism comes from that. They realized that a tree was not just a bunch of wood. It was a living being. It was a spirit in there, and it was intelligent. You know, it made things for you to eat. It housed insects and birds, and it was a home, and it was, you know, there was a point where people thought trees were God in the history of people's beliefs about God, because they saw that life couldn't exist without trees. So once we get into this integral level, we really actually have the ability to see how all the puzzle pieces fit together. And it's like, oh my God. And you realize, wow, I've really made some mistakes along the way here. The question is, are we going to destroy ourselves before we get there? And it's a very big software upgrade. I mean, most people have a hard time dealing with a material reality, like paying their bills, eating real food, raising their kids. So, you know, you plug somebody into an integral level. It's kind of like being on, 10 grams of mushrooms where, you're intersecting with all these realities, and it's kind of hard to balance your checkbook and drive your car. But one of the points I want to make in this regard is that all the experts, from Arthur M. Young to Gene Gebser to Houston Smith to Joseph Campbell to Carl Jung to Ken Wilber, and a long list of them, all recognize something fundamental. For you to effectively grow in consciousness, you must not only transcend, but you must include. And that's the problem we have, because we have most of the world population at the mental level of consciousness, where it worships ideas as though they're gods. And what is religions but a bunch of ideas, right? So until you have a religious experience, you're just memorizing stuff written on a piece of paper by somebody else and thinking it's God, which is, God thinks this is tremendously hilarious because God's got all the time in the, universe. So God says, hey, let's get lost together and have some fun, And so when you get to the mental level and you forget our developmental history and that the world is the very fabric from which we get our sense of self from. It's where our body comes from. It's place. I mean, what story can you act out without place, right? You can't act out a myth. You can't live a myth without place. So if you forget about the archaic level, you forget about the importance of the soil. You forget about the importance of the microorganism. You forget about the importance of and the nature of water. You forget about the sacredness of the sky and of breathing. If you forget about the mythic level, well, what do scientific materialist left brain people call a myth? They now think it's a lie. So myths are equal to lies. So what happens is you overlook the deepest, most powerful, most important stories that tell you things that you cannot grasp with a left brain approach. You have to be able to have the same capacity to understand myth that you have to read poetry. And I could go deep into that, but to keep it simple, so we have now got to the point where we don't understand the deeper meanings of the stories that have been told for as long as human beings have been on the planet, and all of them are telling us about reality. Marci Eliade, one of the greatest teachers on myth and world religion and shamanism, makes the point, all myths are true. And now that's hard for a lot of people to grasp. But a myth is something that's never true, but always will be. A myth is something that is never true, but always will be, right? And I'll give you an example. You're an individual. And your thoughts are completely your own. And you're going to die. And it's going to be screened to black. Because you're really just an animal walking around, right? So that's never true. But it always will be. There's some element of truth to that, but there's also an element of it that's not true. Now, if I said that to you as a poem and said, read between the lines, you would probably say something like, God likes to play hide and go seek. And I would say, you got it. But if you don't have the capacity for abstract thinking, because you're still stuck in the child archetype and you're still caught in belief systems that stop you from seeing the metaphor, the analogy, or the poetry.
Hold the paradox.
Or the paradox. Osho says you can never understand God until you can handle a paradox, and it's very true. Then you get yourself into trouble. So you see, we have transcended but not included myth. So now but isn't it funny that we love Harry Potter and we love movies and we love James Bond and we love all these things, but we actually forgot about the most important stories there are. And many of those stories are telling you about the inherent relationship you must have with the earth and with the elements, or you will cease to exist as we can exist here. So we've transcended, but not included the archaic. We're destroying the planet. We've transcended the mythic and not included it. And so we don't understand the real stories anymore. And we keep telling stories that are used to sell you stuff that you don't need and kill each other with it. Then we are at the mental level. And if we go into the integral level and we don't carry those three other levels, we will never be integral, because you cannot be integrated without all those things. So here's sort of a punchline to all this. When the integral age is coming on like it is right now, to the degree that you do not understand the inherent nature of the earth and the inherent nature of our biological existence, or biology as it exists, to the degree that you do not understand myth and cannot not only interpret story, but realize that you are yourself a myth. And that is very important. Know thyself. There's a myth for you.
Yeah, often unaware of the myth that's moving through us.
Yes. Okay, so when the integral age comes on and these dimensions start to open up, to the degree that you are, shall we say, carrying blind spots, it's going to be like you're in a rapid download, but you're running such old, outdated software that it will collapse the computer, as an analogy.
As Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Yes, exactly. He says until you meet the unconscious will meet you on the outside in the events of your life until you meet it on the inside, and you will call it fate. It'll meet you on the outside in the events of your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, you'll always think shit's happening to you instead of realizing you're actually generating this by being unconscious. And so that's when I say the pain teacher comes to wake you up, right?
And that it's really important to examine where our neuroses are, because those are the kind of the doorways into perceiving what our behavioral compensations are because of the psychic stress that we haven't fully dealt with.
That's the pain teacher. Mm-hmm. So the pain teacher is really the soul saying, you must take responsibility for what you're creating, because ultimately you're God embodied and you have all that power in you. I mean, for a lot of people, that's hard to comprehend. But when you look at what we can create when we're really living to our potential, I mean, we have examples all around us. Mozart, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, all, we all know when we're watching an actor or a musician that's in soul. We feel it. Because you cannot tell the difference between who the person is and who they're acting. When you see a great singer on stage, for which I could give many names, but some of the ones that come to me are people like Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder or Carole King, or, I'm showing you how old I am now. Michael Jackson. I mean, there's no question that was a man who expressed himself from his soul, because it moves you so deeply, because you're seeing the potential that lives in you, not realizing that is in you, you project it onto somebody else. And when you think of all the great geniuses, look, we got airplanes from human beings having these ideas. We've got everything around us. Steve Jobs and the cell phone. I mean, whoever you want to attribute that. Tesla. I mean, the list is so long. These are people that were ensouled. They were in their genius. And in my philosophy and in my experience, every single soul carries a piece of the grand puzzle that is important for helping us realize our potential and realize who and what we really are. And to the degree you transcend those structure stages of consciousness and do not include them, you limit the likelihood of ever finding the genius within yourself and coming to know thyself, because you are dropping aspects of perception that are absolutely necessary to perceive wholeness. And your genius is an expression of wholeness. It's an expression of the divine. It's an expression of the entire cosmos. In fact, none of us could be here without the entire cosmos. When people tell me they're alone and they feel isolated, I'm like, you really need to spend some time asking yourself, what did it take to create you? And what does it take to sustain you? You breathe 25,900 breaths a day. It came from outside of you. You drink water. You have to. It came from outside of you. And that water is all over the universe and has probably been around for millions and millions of years. You're made of about 100 trillion cells, depending on whose book you read, 50 to 100 trillion. And each one of them is made of 100 trillion atoms. And somehow it's all dancing. And those atoms have been around for billions of years. You eat food that comes from outside you, without which you wouldn't exist. Every cell in your body, based on science, turns over every year. So the Andre sitting here is a completely different Andre physically than he was a year ago. And you say, okay, where'd that come from? Well, it came from the periodic table, let's say. Where did that come from? Well, some of it came from the earth, some of it came from the sun. Most people believe that the earth came out of the sun. You say, where'd the elements there come from? Well, they came from other stars. Where does that end? It goes through the whole universe. So when you track back what you are as a physical body, it takes the entire universe to create every one of us, and we're constantly breathing each other. We're breathing air. There's scientific evaluations saying you probably have X number of molecules from the Buddha in you right now, and atoms. I mean, like, we're all each other, and we're all the whole. The whole thing is playing this beautiful game of individuality, because each one of us is carrying a piece of the puzzle that is absolutely essential. And if we don't engage that process of cultivating our genius, then we walk around feeling empty all the time. We walk around feeling hungry. We walk around feeling that we don't fit in, or that we're unwanted, or we're unneeded, or we're not valued. And all of that is the pain teacher saying, hey, you're looking in the wrong place. Quit doing what everybody else wants you to do. Quit doing what you think you have to do for money, because who cares about all your money? If it's not filling you with love, you're going to spend all that money trying to medicate the pain teacher. And so I think the pain teacher is the soul coming to say, you're moving in the wrong direction. It's kind of like a GPS. If you're with the wrong person in a relationship, the GPS starts buzzing. You're going right when you should be going left. If you're doing what you're doing for money, but it's not making you happy, the GPS says wrong direction. It's going to cause pain. If you're drinking more coffee or doing more drugs than you can integrate and use effectively, the GPS goes off and the soul says, hey, and one of the realities of being who and what we are as an expression of the divine, we have to take responsibility for what we create. God's got nobody to blame. And so neither do we. And so the paradox of it all is that we have this built-in guidance system, and unfortunately, a lot of religious teachings knock your awareness of that system out, and so you get caught in shame and guilt and sin and all this stuff, and not realize that a lot of what you're feeling is just the heart saying you're going in the wrong direction. And so ultimately, I think back to your first question, is we're all here to create together as a family, as a human family, and we're here to create beauty, good, truth, and we're here to give the genius of ourselves to each other, because every time I pass my genius on to you or your genius on to me, we each carry a little bit more genius. And when I get to experience Andre's genius or Zach Bush's genius or Ken Wilber's genius or Houston Smith's genius or an amazing chemist's genius or, Bruce Lipton's genius of epigenetics, every time, all of a sudden I see more and more, and I see more of myself, and I feel more amazed by all these people and more connected to them, and I see the genius of the animal kingdom and the genius of the birds, and all of a sudden I progressively go, oh my God, this is a freaking miracle. This is absolutely mind-bogglingly beautiful and stunning. But to the degree that we transcend without including, we cannot see the genius in ourselves, and we can't see the genius in each other. And so we keep creating more and more of what we don't want, which ultimately just leads to, as Rumi says, the function of a broken heart is to let your love pour out. So the question is, how broken do we have to get the love to pour out, when legitimate spiritual teachings is a path to making love every day? And to the degree that you live a life, like obviously you love what you're doing, your whole environment is saturated with this is me, and this is who I am, and this is why I'm here. I mean, it's pouring through the walls, right? If I put you in someone else's studio and said, now do your thing, you would feel like you were wearing the wrong underwear or the wrong shoes. You're like, I can't, this is not a reflection of my being, right? Your environment is the physical manifestation of your mind. I am sitting inside of your mind. And it's beautiful. And that's what we give to each other. When someone enters Spirit Gym with me, they get to sit inside of my mind, and I say, guess what? Here's a myth meta structure. No matter what you believe, it's going to fit in here. And all I'm going to do is ask you each step of the way, how's that working for you? Is it creating freedom? Are you happy? Are you healthy? Are you making love? Are you growing in your relationships? Or are you taking drugs and blaming it on everybody else and poor me, and still dad, mad at mom and dad and haven't forgiven yourself? And the thing, God digs all that too, right? Because, God says, hey, I love playing all these games. I got nothing else to do. Let's get lost together and let's get found together, and so, unconditional love always says yes. And that's one of the harsh realizations about God. God says yes to everything. You want to be an asshole? Yes, let's do it. You want to love people? Yes, let's do that. You want to steal from people? Well, we can do that. It's an old trick. I'm getting tired of it, but I'll do it with you because I love you. And, this reminds me of the saying, you might have heard it before. When a pickpocket sees a saint, he only sees his pocket. But when a saint sees a pickpocket, he sees God. And so we're kind of all like pickpockets until we become saints. And when we grow through the levels of consciousness by transcending and including, we see more and more of God and less pocket. And I think that's what we're all doing here.
It's such a beautiful breakdown, man. I think right now we're in this mythos of separation, this Cartesian way of dissecting reality into our own limited box of intellectual understanding. And with that, we're seeing more suffering in so many places. Just some random stats I came across, that suicide is the number 2 cause of death for kids 10 to 14 years old.
It's shocking.
900% increase in anxiety and depression over the last year. 1 in 3 people report being depressed. 3 times as many men are committing suicide than women. We're living in a time where that is a reality. And at the same time, birthing a new paradigm, just like birthing a new human, is messy, violent, painful at times, bloody.
Yeah.
And you're inviting this perspective to recognize our inherent interdependency.
Yeah.
And so when so much of the suffering comes as a byproduct of the illusion of separation, feeling like we are separate from all life,
Yes.
then we fail to recognize how connected we are. And once we start to recognize that, all the suffering starts to become alleviated. And so any thoughts there as we start to birth this new paradigm and recognizing our interdependence?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to the hijacking of our education systems. I mean, I've studied Steiner for 30 plus years, and my children are in a Waldorf school system, and I've studied school systems around the world. And when you look at the fact, for example, that about 95 to 98% of all education given in the world in education systems from kindergarten to university come by way of mathematical logical reasoning. But according to Howard Gardner's research and others, only 5 to 8% of the world population learns effectively through the mathematical logical reasoning. And when you look at, as Ken Wilber showed and others, that our entire education system was invented by plantation owners to keep the children of the slaves busy so they could work them longer and to teach them not to think for themselves, but to follow orders. And so that industrialized education system has been used to indoctrinate people to think, believe, act, behave, and purchase exactly how the plantation owners, which are still running the world. COVID was a perfect example of trying to turn us into little plants in a greenhouse, and it's going on hot and heavy, and they're always up to that. So when you look at the fact that we went through the Enlightenment and we've gotten progressively more scientific and materialistic, which is a left brain perspective. And the left brain is always cutting pieces out of the whole, right? It's not the big picture. This is why Steiner said you should not teach children how to read nor expose them to mathematics until they're at least 7 to 10 years of age, depending on the child, because the right brain hemisphere comes on first in the normal growth and development of the child, because the child needs to spend time at the pond and in nature before it starts dissecting the frog and saying, oh, look at this actin and myosin filament. And, because what happens is you start actually seeing everything as isolated from everything else. So we have now got this linear left brain narrative that does not show us how everything fits together and how it works together and why it needs to stay in this integrated whole, because that is life. And I'll give you a very simple example from nutrition. You can see magazine articles and journal articles and infomercials all day long of, oh, you got this wrong, take this. I just saw someone sent me a video clip of a guy talking about hypothyroidism and how they're using all these thyroid medications. And ultimately his approach was, oh, you just need to take these B vitamins and do these couple of little things. What was it? It was him saying, you can fix it with nutrition, but you don't need to be taking these T3, T4, synthetic hormones. I said, well, that's really nice. But what he forgot to say is, how did you burn your thyroid out in the first place? What were the beliefs and the behaviors that led you to living in such a way that you don't know how to eat, you don't know how to sleep, you don't know how to exercise, you don't know how to breathe, and you don't know how to take care of your physical body, and you don't know how to manage your mind? And by the way, taking all those vitamins, about 96% of which are not organic, which means they're all concentrated plants that are loaded with pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and rodenticides, many of which are synthetically manufactured unless you get certified organic, or you're, even if you're getting the supplements that are extracts from plants, they are still coming from sick plants. So you can't get good vitamins from sick plants. You're eating concentrations of toxic food from a toxic earth. And I say, well, good. Now that you know that these vitamins will support your thyroid gland, why don't you go look at what foods those vitamins come from so you know what to actually eat, and then go find an organic farm to buy them from. And then, oh, by the way, you might want to look at what the qualities of those plants are, because that would tell you, for example, what aspect of your life you need to look at. For example, if you need ginseng because you're low on energy, it says, to me, Paul Chek, it says, let me teach you how to cultivate energy and manage your energy, because obviously you're spending more energy, you're more yang or catabolic than you are anabolic. So the point I'm making is you can take the right vitamins and you can make your thyroid symptoms go away for a while, but you still have not addressed the behavior and the imbalances. All you're doing now is doing allopathic medicine with vitamins, but you have not addressed the issue. And those issues go right back to the management of this planet, because there's only 4 to 6% of the food grown on this planet is organic, and only 4 to 6% of the food eaten is organic. And the rest of it's highly toxic and poisonous. And you think just because you're extracting vitamins out of that stuff, well, I got news for you. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit unless you're Mother Nature. It's just a metaphor. You can't make good vitamins out of poisoned food. And what's the point of taking vitamins if it's doing nothing but fortifying your ability to continue to live in a way that's unconscious and out of balance? And so what am I saying? You see the left brain approach right there? So the point is, don't teach the kid to dissect the frog until it knows its relationship with the pond, and it knows its relationship with the mosquitoes and the fish and everything else. And so as soon as you start teaching kids to read and do mathematical, logical thinking, you chop their mind up and they lose touch with wholeness, and you end up graduating with a PhD and you know everything about nothing. That's why they say a PhD is piled higher and deeper. Or an expert is someone who knows more and more about less and less until they know absolutely everything about nothing. And I'm just simply saying we've got fundamental problems. And what I'm really saying is, when you put too much of your consciousness through the left brain, you actually keep dissecting. And so what do you get? You get to things like the hard problem. How does the brain create consciousness? Well, the brain doesn't create consciousness. As Deepak Chopra once said, there was, it took about, X number of billion years in evolution before the first brain showed up. So obviously something was conscious enough to make a brain, right? So the point that I'm making is the brain actually is a limiting valve it's a filter for consciousness, so that you aren't experiencing everything simultaneously at once. And that's the beauty of our intention, is we can change the channel. I can focus on you, or I can focus on the art behind you. But if you don't have an education system that does what Waldorf does and builds the right brain connections through story, through myth, through art, through singing, through dancing, through field trips, through, like during COVID, my kids' school refused to lock those kids up, put them in masks and do all that stuff, which I would have been on them like skunk smell if they would have tried that. But by law, they had to put the kids outside. They could not let them inside. So every day, rain or shine, those kids were out in the dirt all day long with their hats under little tents and things. But my kids loved it. They thought it was the greatest thing. We'd come home soaking wet from the rain and covered in mud. They thought it was just fantastic. So meanwhile, everybody else is staring at a computer screen, wearing a mask, not seeing each other's faces, going further and further into the left brain, while the Steiner kids were going deeper and deeper into the right brain under the same stress. Steiner kids got more whole and the rest of the kids got more broken. Okay? So do you see what I'm really saying here? Part of the pathology is that the powers that be are pushing us into a disconnected relationship with the world, which generates primordial fear, because at an unconscious level, we're feeling very disconnected, which is very scary. We're losing touch with nature. We're losing touch with each other. We're losing touch with reality, that which keeps you alive. We're losing touch with what's happening right now because they're throwing so much stuff at us, you can't think straight. So what a great opportunity to say, hey, maybe we should play in the dirt a little more. Maybe we should actually pay attention to the fact that it's not the supplements that make us better. It's changing our understanding of what creates wholeness in the first place. Maybe we should spend more time gardening and less time on computers and cell phones, and maybe we should protect water supplies, and maybe we should protect food supplies, and maybe we should stop poisoning the atmosphere with chemtrails. In other words, we can come back to wholeness. And the question is, how much pain is it going to take before we wake up to our potential as souls? Rudolf Steiner makes a very important point in this regard. He says, human beings will continue to invent technologies outside of themselves until they either realize all these technologies are inferior copies of what is inside of them, or they destroy the world. The question is, which will come first? And here we are. The question is, which will come first?
We are on the precipice of that discovery.
We're on the precipice of that discovery, and that is the initiation. We are in an initiatory process. We are right now in the opening of integral consciousness. And to get there, we have to go back, pick up the archaic consciousness, and realize we are people of the earth. I mean, Adam means Adamus, creature of the earth. Human means humus, creature of the earth, or in Arabic, creature of red earth. We realize we have to eat, but we think food is just stuff. We think we can grow it in labs. We don't realize we're eating spirit. We're eating food is not just energy, it's information. And everything you eat is telling your body something, just like software. And if you eat stuff that doesn't work for you, then you end up with health problems, which then you medicate or surgically operate on, but you still keep eating the wrong information, which is why individual dieting, learning what your body needs and paying attention is critical, because your body's genetics tell you what information it needs to keep you healthy. We've got to look deeper into story. We've got to look at what story is. My favorite definition of myth is a story that tells itself. Well, we should meditate on that, because life itself is a story. And if life is the story that's telling itself, we should say, who is telling the story? We use the word God for that. Science has no answer for that. They're at an impasse. I've studied over 37 theories of everything. None of them have an explanation for where the strings came from or where the energy for the Big Bang came from. They're all at an impasse. So what you see is religion and science are both equal in the fact that they're myths. Religion is myth and science is myth, because none of them can explain origins. And that remains a mystery. And that's why it's a personal relationship. And when you go back to the beginning of our conversation and realize love is the verb of God, the way you get through the challenges we're getting through is not figure out ways to make more money or make more laws or vaccinate more people. It's how do I come to my heart and create more love? Because that's the fastest way to grow your consciousness and your connection. And what is spirituality? A progressive connection to a greater whole. And the more sense of a greater whole we have, the less alone we feel, the more love we feel, the more connected we feel, the more supported we feel, and the less we need to defend ourselves against each other and traumatize each other. And so, for me, it's like, okay, at some point here, we all have to wake up and hold hands and circle the globe and realize what we all need together. And the question is it going to take an iPhone to do that? Is it going to take more social media to do that? Or can you just ask yourself, who am I? How did I get here?
Right.
What am I really? And how do I embrace that, worship that, love that, and celebrate that, and become more of that? And that's really what spirituality is. It become more of what you really are.
Absolutely. And my intention with this podcast in particular is to really empower people with as many insights and tools to go on the path of that gnosis, to know the truth of themselves and to discover their inherent physical vitality. And right now, like we spoke to many times, the education system teaches us what to think, not how to think.
Yep.
And you're somebody who has embarked on truly understanding how to think around many different disparate but interconnected fields of study. And that's why I enjoy talking to you so much, because you see and you can put together the pieces of how interconnected they all are and how they affect one another. And so for somebody that's listening right now, I don't want you just, on top of sharing what you know, I would love for you to share how you have come to truly understand. Like when you have gone to understand the body or the mind, how do you engage it so you truly come to understand it? So basically, how do you think, and how do you think it's wise to learn how to think?
Well, it's a very good question. So essentially, what you're asking me to describe is my thinking process, because that's the only one I have mastery of. But I am a teacher, and I've had over 63,000 students come through the institute, which is a multidisciplinary institute. So I have every kind of doctor and therapist you can imagine, and even people changing careers. First, I'll say that I didn't do well in school. I had a very hard time in school. And what I found most frustrating is I could not get answers to my questions. And that irritated me. And I had the same experience in church. And it left me, by the time I was in the 9th grade, I thought, why should I keep doing this? And what I found is that when I was doing things like, I was a sponsored motocross racer at a young age. And so I worked with great mechanics and very skilled people. And I started working in an automotive repair shop to make extra money on the side with a world-class mechanic who also built NASCAR racing engines. And I watched how his process worked. And one of the things I learned from him is that you keep things clean and orderly. And I later built my own race cars and was a stock car racer, built my own engines. And
You've lived many lives.
I have, yeah. I've been very, very busy. And I was very successful. I was a drag racer as well. But what my point here is that I found that if I went to people that had mastery and I asked them questions, they always gave me good answers. But I found that the same questions asked in school usually resulted in me being told to be quiet or quit asking questions, or, if I would say, well, how does that happen? Or why does that happen? And they didn't want to answer the questions. They just wanted me to hear what they were saying as though it was the absolute fact. But my mind doesn't work that way. So step one for me is effective learning is you always have to ask what causes that. Take these vitamins to balance your thyroid. What causes that? Then I say, well, what caused that? What caused the vitamin? So what do you learn? Well, you can read the book Science and Agriculture by Arden Anderson. And he says right in there, in the rhizosphere of most any plant, you can find almost every hormone in the human body, and that what we call vitamins are actually plant hormones. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that if you're taking vitamins that are really extracts of plant hormones, then why not eat the plant? And they say, well, what causes a plant to have a good profile of phenolics, terpenes, alkaloids, amino acids, fats, carbohydrates, which is a vitamin complex? Well, it turns out that's all utterly dependent upon the microorganisms and the balance of minerals in the soil. And so then you say, well, what causes that? Well, nature does it all by itself. But if you want to balance an imbalance, you have to know how nature does it. So to get to what causes good vitamins, which requires good plants, you have to have good soil. And you have to say, well, what is the environmental factors that lead to good soil? So without going through the whole chain, you see, I'm always asking what causes that. If you come to me with some kind of chronic ailment, my first question is what causes that? And then I say, okay, what other systems in the body interact with that system? Because I might figure out why your adrenal glands are fatigued, i.e. you have too much cortisol output and adrenaline output, but I have to say what causes that. And it turns out to be diet factors and lifestyle factors and the way you think and the way you perceive stress and how you react to it, which always boils down to your beliefs, because all actions are the products of beliefs. Choices are the responses to your beliefs. So my first mode of how to think effectively is always ask the question, what causes that, until you get to the impasse where you say, I'm at the reductio ad absurdum. I can't go any further. And now I can see the chain of causal connection. to get to the point of your adrenal fatigue, your thyroid problem, your life crisis, whatever. So the next thing that I found to be very, very important, which I've devoted my life to, is to look at all the sciences or the philosophies or sources of information that are relevant to whatever the topic you want to study is. For example, if you want to be a good photographer, you got to study light. You can't just study film and cameras. You can know a lot about the internal workings of a camera, but if you don't understand light, you'll never be a good cameraman, right? So if you really want to study light, then you're going to end up getting into things like Goethe and the theory of light, and you're going to get into Steiner, and you're going to get into, then you're going to find that there's a psychological correlate to color, and that everything about light affects your psyche. And so you see, you keep what causes that and what are the basics. So what I found is you've got to study the basics of each system or philosophy or methodology that you're looking at. For example, I'll give you an example of basics. An exercise has 3 key components: setup, execution, and follow through. If the setup is not correct, the execution cannot be correct and the follow through cannot be correct. So if you don't understand that those 3 phases of an exercise all begin with setup, which is dependent upon posture and joint mobility, and whether or not you have an integrated balance of stabilizers versus prime movers, which has to do with whether or not you have normal infant development and developmental structure stages of development in place, which I have to identify and correct in people all the time, even the greatest athletes in the world, then you will never really know that much about exercise. But paradoxically, I have countless people in my training program with master's degrees in exercise and sports science, exercise physiology, biomechanics, and kinesiology who do not know that an exercise has 3 phases, and that if you don't do the developmental work to set up right, which means the structure has to be ready to do the exercise and you have to have the ability to do it, then you're always going to be throwing Band-Aids at people, which is why most athletes that come to me come with a gym bag full of wraps, straps, props, and pills. And they can't figure out why, with all their magic biohacking toys, that they can't they can't grow, they can't get any better. And so I have to go right back to the very, very basics. So step number 2 is look at the fundamental sciences, the fundamental principles, and the fundamental philosophies that are related to whatever you're doing and master the basics. And how important is this? I'll tell you. I'm sure you've seen martial arts competitions and kickboxing and boxing and Olympic sports. So I've got a question for you. How many times when somebody was handed the gold medal or won the world championship and the announcer said, "How did you do it?" The most common answer is, "I stuck to the basics." I've heard it 1,000 times. I stuck to the basics. And look, I was on the 3rd ranked amateur boxing team in the world, which I had to fight my way onto. I became the trainer of that boxing team. And we spent hours and hours and hours doing the same basic drills that you do in beginner boxing. And here we got world champions, national champions. I mean, many of the guys on the team had 320 fights by the time they were 19 or 20 years of age. And we're sitting there going jab, jab, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, till your arms are ready to fall off, right?
Bruce Lee, I fear not the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks one time or punch, but one punch 1,000 times.
Right. And I'll tell you a little story about that. You may know this, but I'll share it with the listeners. This also describes what's wrong with our young people today, especially young men. A young man had a friend who was a good martial artist, and he didn't like the fact that his buddy was better than him. So he said, "I want to be a martial artist like you. Where do I go?" And he said, "Well, you can come to my master." So he goes and he meets his friend's master, and his master says, "Yes, I will train you." And he walks out in the driveway next to a great big water fountain, and he says, "This is your first assignment." And he throws him how to throw a front snap kick. And he says, "Do 100 of those." So the master walks away and comes back a while later, and the kid's just standing there. He says, "I did 100. He said, "Good, do 100 more." Well, this went on, and it went on, and finally the kid said, "Well, I'm sick and tired of doing this. Can't you teach me something else? And the master said, throw 100 more, and he walked away. Came back a little while later, the kid was standing there, and he says, what's next? And he said, do 100 more. And the kid got snotty and mouthy. And the master said, come here. And he walked him over to the fountain. He grabbed him by the neck, and he buried his head under the water and held him down there till he was about to drown. And he let the kid up. And the kid's looking at him in a state of shock. And the master looked him right in the eyes and said, when you are as hungry to learn martial arts as you just were to breathe, come back. And that's the problem, because mastering the basics is the foundation of all learning. And if you don't master the basics and you keep going above and you learning the fancy stuff, you don't ever really know what you're creating, because you don't know what the house is built on. But what do we have today? We have people that go to universities and learn how to hang chandeliers and build pretty roofs, but their foundation is falling apart. We have nutritionists that don't know anything about the soil. I've taught thousands of nutritionists, and I asked them, who of you can tell me the basic physiology of the soil? I've never seen a single hand go up. I said, well, if you don't understand the soil, you don't understand nutrition. I've had countless people hire me for help because they're unhealthy and having serious problems, from diseases to whatever, that have degrees in nutrition. And when they get my paperwork, it has a comprehensive analysis of their nutrition. And very regularly, they will call me back and they'll say to my secretary, I don't want to fill all this paperwork out on nutrition. There's a ton of questions here. I don't need help with my nutrition. Would you ask Paul if I can skip this section? And they've been taught what to say. Paul said, if you have a degree in nutrition, it's twice as important for you to fill that section out. I've never had a single patient with a degree in nutrition that had a clue about nutrition. What they had a clue about was their favorite sports bars, or their favorite magic powders, or magic potions, or eat this herb and you'll live forever type mentality, or if you have a thyroid problem, take these vitamins, but they don't understand the foundation. So the first thing is what causes this. The second thing is master the basics of whatever field is directly connected, and to the degree there's indirect connections that you got to know. For example, I cannot know how to rehab your adrenal glands until I know what you believe, how you live, and how you relate to 6 foundation principles: nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement, because every one of them is a source of stress, and the body summates stress. So how you respond to any sport or any kind of exercise or any kind of stress is based on the total stress picture, because physical, emotional, mental stress summates in the body, and the body reacts to the total stress picture. But many athletes only look at physical stress. And I often say, which of you athletes hangs your divorce, your low bank account, and your stress with mommy and daddy at the door when you come in the gym? None of you. And all I got to do is ask you, have you ever been going through a real stressful relationship period with your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend? And how did it affect your weightlifting? And when they think about it, they all go, oh, wow, you know what? When I was going through a divorce, that's when I got my back injury. Or, they can always see the connection when someone points it out. So we have to look at, my point is, first you got to look at the obvious. You got a problem with your adrenal glands. I got to understand how the adrenals work, but then I got to understand what provides the environment for a healthy adrenal gland. And that can lead to the study of psychology. It doesn't seem like it's direct, it's indirect from the perspective of I have an adrenal problem. I got to study psychology. Then I got to study belief systems, and most of those are based in religion. 85% of the world population claims religious affiliation. So it turns out that almost all belief systems have some connection to religion. And so then what you find out is most people don't understand their own religion. And then we find religions very confused. I can prove it to you. If you get out your computer and do a Google search, how many sects of Christianity are there? There are 45,000 branches of Christianity right now, each claiming to have the authentic teachings of Jesus. Okay, so the way I analogize that, I'm Paul Chek. I own the Chek Institute. If there was 45,000 branches of being a Chek professional, I would know that I had terribly confused students and I had not succeeded as a teacher. So that means that we haven't really understood the teachings of Jesus at the fundamental level, or we would not have 45,000 variations of the theme. Okay? So my next principle is don't take in more information than you can actually digest, metabolize, synthesize, and integrate through practical application. So many people have been in my library, and the first thing they notice is there's notes all through the books, inside the covers. There's arguments written to the authors saying, this point is incorrect, and here's reasons why. And I write complete arguments. Why? Because I know someday when I die, my students are going to look through that library, and I want them to know how to think. So we want to look at these important steps, but we want to remember that if you cannot take a concept into your life and apply it, then you do not have real knowledge. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Ultimately, the goal of the education process is wisdom. And the way you create wisdom is you first test the information, and you make mistakes and you have successes, and you make mistakes and you have successes. That is the application of knowledge. And through the trial and error process of applying knowledge, you synthesize it down to what works most consistently. And a wise person is somebody who knows what works most consistently and tries that first. And what is the Hippocratic Oath? First, do no harm. Before you do surgery or take dangerous drugs, try getting your diet right, your hydration right, try getting enough sleep, try learning to breathe properly, and try moving your body effectively. Well, in my experience, about 98% of people, when they do those things, which I put right in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, do not need drugs, do not need surgery. Their consciousness comes back on, their mind clears up, their stinking thinking alleviates tremendously, and now they have the libido to be a creative person and find their way in life. And I think a healthy person naturally grows spiritually and naturally grows in consciousness, but unhealthy people get trapped in their bodies and their mind gets stuck right where their survival threat is, and they can't get past it. And when they keep getting railroaded with false education and false profit-driven practices, then you get what we've got in the world today. So I could go further and further, but in essence, there's not really more to say that's important, because then I get into too much information. So ask, what causes that? Study the basics. Don't take in more knowledge than you can work with and synthesize, and then identify what works sometimes and for who, and then cultivate a library of however it is that you learn best, by writing down, by creating systems, etc., so that that knowledge is easily accessible to you. So, for example, I have mapped out all the relationships between the glands and the organs, which muscles they respond or in connection with, which joints they're in connection with, which ligaments, which tendons, which meridians, which psychological themes, so that when my students go through Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 3 training, they have a map that shows them where that organ produces pain in the body, what joints will have what types of malfunctions, which muscles will get tight or flaccid, what kind of movement problems that will create, what meridians that's associated with, what psychological themes that is associated with what herbs, what essential oils, and what types of mental emotional practices or mental emotional healing will restore balance. So that in 1 or 2 pages, they say, okay, if somebody comes to me with a right shoulder problem, I know I've got to check the health of the liver, and I know that relates to the issue of anger. And so I've got to look at where they're having anger in their relationships, and then I've got to detox them, because if the liver's backed up, it'll accelerate and exaggerate the perception of anger. So I have to go from the top down and the bottom up and meet at the liver. And next thing you know, the chronic rotator cuff problem that wouldn't go away clears up, usually with something as simple as a parasite cleanse or a heavy metal detox. So there's an example of practical wisdom. And so taking in tons of, which we have a major problem with today. People are constantly taking information and constantly reading stuff on the internet, and it's almost like the mind is a vacuum, and they sound really cool in a coffee shop, but what you end up with, sick doctors, overweight, out of shape trainers, policemen and soldiers that are unfit, unhealthy, and out of shape. And this is why I say to all my students, if you don't wear it, don't share it. You should eat, sleep, breathe, and shit what you teach. And you should be comfortable teaching in your underwear so everybody can see the results of what you're teaching them. And I do something fun to point this out to them.
You get in your underwear?
No. Well, I've done that lots of times. They know. I mean, I'm going to be 63 next month.
You're ripped.
And a lot of these young guys, even professional athletes, come out and lift with me or go in the rock garden, and they can't even budge rocks, and I'm picking up chest high. And they're like, how in the world did you do that? And I say, I practice what you're supposed to be learning right now. But what I do is I say, okay, let's take 8 or 10 diet books that are on the market right now and look at the picture of the author. And then go on Facebook and Instagram and find current pictures of them. And on almost every case, they put a picture on their new book that's 20 years younger that makes them look like they're healthy and vibrant, but they're actually really out of shape, unhealthy, overweight, and and just not healthy. So they're creating illusions. And the illusion is, if you follow this diet book, you're going to get healthy, but it didn't even work for them. And so I say, look, you must wear your knowledge. And what it does is it takes a lot of anxiety out of you. Because when you go to work every day and just share what it is that you do to be a healthy, balanced person, you don't have to think about it anymore. You have to think to teach a kid how to tie a shoe, right? I eat real food for the following reasons. I drink quality water for the following reasons. And you just explain how you live, and to the degree you are congruent with your own living philosophy and your body and your life are reflective of that, people know you're genuine, and then you have a coherent field. You see, if I'm sitting here telling you stuff that I'm insecure about because I don't practice or don't believe it, or I just think it's the right thing to say, your unconscious mind will pick up that incoherence in me, and I'm doing what in shamanism is called sending a double message. That's like when you ask someone, how you doing today? And they say, oh, I'm fine. That's a double message.
As you shake your head, no, yeah.
Yeah, and so they know something's wrong, right? We all know when somebody's not telling us the truth because we sense at an unconscious level or intuitively what the real truth is, but most of us are too busy to call them on it.
Yeah.
It's my job as a therapist to call you on it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So that framework for understanding and learning how to learn is so important, especially in this day and age where there's this digital deluge and we have an abundance of information, but a lack of people applying their knowledge and information to turn it into wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I've been so inspired how you've come to learn and integrate this understanding and wear what you teach, and wear what you share.
I want to share something real quick if I could. I worked in the largest physical therapy clinic in San Diego for 4 years. If I had time to tell you the story of how I got there, I was the first clinical massage therapist ever to work in a physical therapy clinic in San Diego County. And it caused a uproar because the physical therapists at that time thought massage therapists were the equivalent of prostitutes. So there was a big uproar. But in a nutshell, the reason I got the job is I rehabilitated the boss after 3 knee surgeries, and none of her 22 physical therapists and athletic trainers could do anything for her. And she had a master's degree in physical therapy. And when I was rehabbing her, the first session I did with her, I got a lot more range of motion and got her to a lot less pain. And she's like, Paul, I have never seen any of these techniques, and I have a master's degree in physical therapy. She said, where did you learn this? You want to hear what I told her? I learned it from you. She goes, what do you mean? We just met. I said, I simply listened to your body and let it guide me to what it needed. And now you see the difference. And she said, oh, can you teach this to my physical therapists? I said, if they're willing to listen, but I want you to know that they're going to have to grow themselves because in order for me to listen to you, I've got to make room for you inside of me. And if your life is too chaotic, your psyche will not let you invest someone else in your body when you're not taking care of yourself, because it'll say, what the hell are you doing worrying about other people? You're still not taking care of yourself. But the point I was getting to is a guy who I later left and started my own physical therapy clinic with, Steve Clark, who had two master's degrees, very highly trained physical therapist. We were an internship site for universities, and they all have to go through a 3-month internship, usually in a neurological ward, a burn ward, an orthopedic ward, and I think there's 1 or 2 other specialties, but they have to do key internships in order to get their degree. And so we always had interns studying with us. And Kathy Grace, the owner of the clinic, said, I want each of these interns to spend a couple of weeks with Paul so they can learn how to see the body and relate to it differently than standard physical therapy. And one of the interns who had come from Ithaca University had just spent an entire day with me and was asking me a lot of questions and like, what are you doing? And why are you doing that? I've never seen that before, that kind of question. We never learned that in physical therapy school. And so I had just walked out of a session with a patient, and he walked into the bay, which is a room about this size with desks all around the walls where we sit and do our chart notes so we can stay up in case insurance companies investigate and stuff. And Steve Clark said to this guy, Brian, he goes, so how was it hanging out with Paul today? And he looked at Steve and he goes, this is the craziest stuff. He says, I've never seen any of this stuff before. I'm seeing him move joints in ways I've never seen. I'm seeing him use needles to do trigger point therapy I've never heard about. He's mobilizing, he's treating trigger points. He's doing all these things. He's doing very isolated, highly specific stretches I've never seen before. And Steve looked at him and smiled and he said, Brian, well, you and I were in physical therapy school learning how much water is displaced when you stick your hand in a bucket. Paul was studying what really needs to be done to help people. And that's the difference. And that sums it up right there. That's exactly the truth.
It's the scientific way of understanding what's actually happening. And I think if I were to plop somebody in front of you right now, like has happened many times throughout your career, and you're endeavored with the task to bring this person into optimal wholeness, as much as I want to, and if we have space for it, we'll continue to dive into the psycho-emotional components of self-actualization and consciousness and the self. But you're inviting the perspective to focus on the basics. And so how were you, if you were to break down the hierarchy of prioritization for becoming whole, starting with, I'm assuming, the body, share maybe about the 4 doctors, if an overview, taking somebody through the process of becoming whole, what is the most important foundational things going into what becomes available to start, digging into unconscious shadow material once you get your nutrition and sleep in line, for example? So how would you go through that whole journey?
Yeah, now to do what I really do is very comprehensive, and it takes 5 years to complete the Chek Academy, and it's intense training. It's intense enough that chiropractors and physical therapists have walked out with tears in their eyes saying, this is so much deeper than I can handle. And usually the reason they're crying is because there's personal trainers that can stay with me. And that is such a blow to their ego. They have a really hard time with it. So over the years, I've had to break the material down and stretch it out. And it's a hands-on training. You have to get tested and you have to turn in case history. So there's no multiple choice test questions. I mean, there's some of those types of, but you always have to go through testing. But I want to tell you a quick story to answer your question. In the year about early 2000s, I started the Institute in 1995, so I've trained a lot of people. And one of my senior instructors, who is still my senior instructor, has been with me for 27 years. He's got an ND degree. He's a naturopathic physician and an osteopathic physician. He's a very, very smart guy. And he's the editor of the Spirit Gym book series. He's a very deep human being, Matthew Walden. And we were having our level 4 examination period, and I would bring patients in, live patients, that they would have to take a patient and do a comprehensive analysis, and each step of the way, me or one of the senior instructors would be watching what they were doing and analyzing it to make sure they were following the procedures and they were doing the problem solving right. And I had Matthew come to me and another instructor, Mark Stone, both came to me on the same day with the same question, neither aware that the other one had done it. And they said, Paul, you've taught us so much. We can analyze people for 8 hours straight. The problem is that most of these people have like 30, 40, or 50 things wrong with them, all of which are important. Like almost every aspect of their life, their body, their hormonal system is really out of balance or problematic. We don't know how in the hell you determine what is the most important to address first and how you go about putting this into a stepwise program, because we're just completely overwhelmed. It's like, what do you do when you have 25 major problems at once? And I really realized I had a problem. I'm like, okay, you see what happens when you spend your life learning like I have, mostly experientially. I spent, 20 plus years traveling around the world looking for the very best doctors and therapists and experts on everything that I kept running into. So if I had lots of temporomandibular joint problems, I said, I got to find the best expert on that in the world. Turned out to be Mariano Roccabato, who a professor of dentistry and physical therapy at the University of Santiago, Chile. So I spent years studying with him. I went to the Czech Republic to study with Vladimir Yonda and Carol Levitt, two of the most elite pioneers of manual therapy and real rehabilitation that included organs and glands and deep stuff, right? So I went to the Charles Hospital and studied with them, and I studied infant development. So the point is, I learned by going to the masters who had already sifted all the crap out and knew what worked and what didn't. And then I took it home and synthesized it. So the point I'm getting at is I had developed an internal system that I thought everybody understood, which is a big mistake for a teacher, right? So these guys are coming to me and I'm like, oh my God, these guys don't know how to prioritize things into what's the most important. So I sat down and I said to my soul, I said, I need to put this into a working system so that they can understand how to do this. So my soul said to me, grab a notebook, let's go for a walk. So I grabbed a notebook and a pen and I started walking. And so my soul said to me, Paul, what is the most important thing that you have to identify for any client or patient if you ultimately want to help them get better? And I thought about it for a second. I said, I have to identify what their dream, goal, or objective is. Because if I don't know what they want to accomplish, then I don't know how to direct their therapy or what is the most important of all these findings in order to inspire them. And if I don't have a dream bigger than their crisis, I don't have a way to inspire levity to overcome the inertia of their challenge and their habits. My soul said, very good, write that down. So my first step is number one, love. What do you love enough to change for? What do you love enough to grow for? And what do you love enough to become? And my soul said, now what do you do with an evaluation? My soul's saying to me inside, what do you do with an evaluation? If you break it down to the most fundamental principles, what are you actually doing? I said, well, I'm looking at where they're too catabolic. What are they doing that's creating more destructive energy and destructive reactions in their body than they are anabolic or tissue healing and recovery and growth and repair process? So I'm looking at the balance of yin and yang. My soul said, very good, write that down. 2, there's only 2 forces that create everything in the universe. And if they're out of balance, your universe is out of balance. And you need to balance those 2 forces or you will not have any good results, no matter how fancy your program or your supplements look. Which I'll segue there. We're at number 2. I came across a myth one time, studying mythology, and it's a Chinese myth. And it really points to this issue. This is why I'm telling you this, and I think you're going to love this. And this is the myth of the dragon. The Taoists don't use the word God, but they do use the word the dragon. So this is the myth of the dragon. The dragon has a favorite hobby. It loves to breathe universes into existence. And every time it breathes a new universe into existence, it is made of 2 baby dragons, a black one called Yin and a white one called Yang. And the dragon looks at its little babies in this new universe and says, the two of you can rest from managing your universe when you can get along. And that is the myth of the dragon. And let me ask you a question. Is it easy for you to calm your mind, meditate, and be relaxed if you have those two dragons not getting along?
No.
Can you be healthy if those two dragons aren't getting along?
Possible.
Can you reach your potential as a creator if your dragons are not getting along?
No.
There you go. So step 2 of the Chek system is balance those two dragons. Because when they're not getting along, you're not getting along either. 3, there's only 3 choices you can make in relationship to any person, place, or thing. The optimal choice, which is best for everybody on your dream team, and that's the people that are supporting you at achieving that objective you put as number 1. So if the choices you're making are creating disharmony in your dream team, you're creating disharmony in your life and the life of others, and you will always have dragons dancing and fighting with each other. The suboptimal choice is the one that gives you instant gratification, but almost always causes problems on your dream team. Addictions are commonly instant gratification, for example. Choice number 3 is to do nothing. Do nothing has 3 applications. Do nothing when you have to make a decision, but you don't have enough information to make an intelligent decision. Think about the last 4.5 years when it comes to making intelligent decisions without the right information. So if you are going to buy a car, but it's stretching your finances, you should really do some research to see if there's a cheaper car that has the same features that might save you $8,000 instead of just falling in love with the first flashy thing you see. If you got to make a decision on surgery versus a natural approach, so you got cancer and it's chemotherapy versus, you better do some research. Know what type of cancer. Talk to experts on both sides of the fence and come to a rational conclusion because you've gathered enough information, right? So the second application is gather enough information to make an intelligent decision, because ultimately you have to suffer the ramifications for better or worse. No one can rescue you from your own choice. I tell my students, choices are like arrows. Once you release them, you cannot call them back, and the world has changed forever. So it's better to don't release the arrow till you're sure that you're hitting the right target or you're in trouble. And it's expensive for a guy like me to teach you how to use a bow and an arrow. Okay. Third is the negative application of do nothing, which is apathy, which means do not, I don't care. And whenever you use the words I don't care, you're in a very deep challenge, because you've lost touch with the beauty, the mystery, and the value of life. And it means that your methodology is dangerously unconscious and probably generating a lot of pain in your life. Then we get to step 4. So 1 love, 2 choices, 2 forces, 3 choices. And those 3 choices apply to 4 doctors. There's 4 doctors you must have a healthy relationship with, or you will never have those dragons in balance, and you will not create your dreams efficiently and effectively. And that is Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, and Dr. Movement. The chief physician is Dr. Happiness, because Dr. Happiness is responsible for deciding what it is that you can do each day to create happiness in your own life, instead of waiting for some pill to make you happy or somebody else to make you happy. Because this is why Osho said the beauty of love is that it never works. And what he meant by that is, as long as you expect someone else to love you and make you feel loved, you will be in a codependent relationship, and eventually the ego will reject your lover because it knows that it's losing itself in the relationship. It's not becoming whole in the relationship.
Wow.
Okay? So the beauty of love is that it never works, unless you are making love for yourself and giving it because you have it, instead of being needy all the time. So Dr. Happiness's job is to identify what is truly happy making for me, which goes right to that 1 love. What do I do for a living? What I think I have to do, or what I love to do? Well, research shows that 70 to 75% of the world population says they hate their job. Well, that's one of the reasons we have such a massively successful business adventure called the medical system, because people have to drug and medicate themselves for not listening to their soul. And it leads to pain. The pain teacher will show up to put a North Star on your compass. Start here. Pay attention to what's causing you to be sick. Dr. Happiness is also the chief physician, because Dr. Happiness has to establish core values. 4, what is the amount of movement that I need and the type of movement that I need to keep myself at least at baseline health so I can deal with the field of gravity and the responsibility of an animal physical body. Then, what is the type of exercise I need to specifically have the conditioning I need to live my dream? You see, because if you come to me as a client or a patient and you say, Paul, all I want to do is play with my grandkids, that's my only goal, then what I have to do with the science of movement is very different than if you say, Paul, I not only want to play with my grandkids, but I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in 10 months. Okay, so first we got to accomplish the grandkids because that means baseline health. Then we got to get ready to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is going to take a staged, scientifically designed exercise program, which I can do. So you see, we have to get very clear on what our values on movement are, because our first objective is to have baseline health, or we're always putting, as I say to my students, you'll be buying a new Porsche for an orthopedic surgeon, but you will not get to choose the color. Okay. Then we have to have core values around diet and hydration. What's the quality of food we're going to eat, knowing that you are what you eat, period. You are what you eat. You turn over every single cell in your body every year, and you're making it out of what you eat. You eat garbage, you become garbage. It's just simple as that. Then we have to say, what is our values around listening to our body instead of reading diet books and getting caught in isms? Any ism is a belief system, and as soon as you enter a belief system, you stop asking questions because the belief system is always closed. So I've rehabilitated many people from diet isms that listen to the idea more than they listen to their body, and those two dragons start making a lot of noise. Many people have sat in my office and spent an hour or more telling me how fantastic their diet philosophy was, and then I had to remind them, you're here because you've got cancer and you're sick. So why are you paying me a large sum of money if you're telling me the truth right now? What you're doing is reciting a belief system, and it's not congruent with the reality that you've brought into my office as your body. So we need to upgrade your belief system to something that's more open and have a relationship with your body and love it and listen to it, because your soul is talking to you through the keyboard called your body. That's where you're making music or noise. It's up to you. Then we have to have values around rest. When am I going to go to bed at night? And
Dr. Quiet.
Dr. Quiet, thank you. When am I going to go to bed at night? And then there's a science to that. It's called nature. You go against nature, you get in trouble. You get dragon problems. Dragons are nature. You have to say, how much time off do I need from work a year, vacation time, so I can, get out of the world of having to also always be outcome oriented, because outcome oriented burns people out. You get control fatigue and you burn out. How much time do I need to spend in introspection and in relationship, in quiet with myself, to have a legitimate, loving relationship with me and get to know thyself, to know me, to be in touch with my feelings, my desires, my dreams, and even my fantasies, because that's an aspect of our creativity. What do I need to really love, care for, respect, and embrace myself? And that could be meditation, it could be Tai Chi, it can be art, it can be time to play your favorite instrument. Each of us has to figure that out, and we all have different needs. If you look at the tree of contemplative practices, there's like 100 different roads in, right? So what we have is we have a chief physician named Dr. Happiness who has to say, what is my dream goal or objective at this time in my life as a big picture? And what is my specific dream goal or objective, which could be my professional dream goal or objective, my athletic dream goal or objective, my spiritual dream goal or objective, my parenting dream goal or objective. So underneath the overarching umbrella of my life, we can have specific dreams, goals, or objectives, but those core values ultimately determine whether or not you have the life force energy and the vitality to carry out any of those dream goals or objectives effectively. And if your dream goal or objective doesn't stretch you, it's not a good one. It's like staying in third grade for 5 years. It's like, okay, yeah, it's easy, but you're You haven't learned anything. And, that'll put you into a soul crisis, just that alone. So ultimately, what I showed my students is that when you look at all this data you've just gathered, you have first identify what they love to do. Then you look at where they're out of balance with regard to nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement. And you orient your therapeutic protocol to identifying which aspect of those 6 foundation principles is leading to the stress that's causing the imbalance between feminine and masculine, yin and yang, anabolic and catabolic. Then you have to identify what their core values are and where they're out of balance with their understanding of those core values, because a lot of people have food values and exercise, but they're completely out of touch with the basic principles, what we call reality. So it's our job as a therapist to say, well, good, but we got to fine tune that a little bit and teach them so that their core values are actually worth living and they're congruent with reality. And so your 3 choices, then once you know what your dream is, you know where you're out of balance, then you have those 3 choices in response to how you manage Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Quiet. And so what you find is that no matter what's wrong with somebody, you have to say, well, your first dream, if you're sick, is just to be healthy. So that's the prerequisite to being a great musician or being a great painter or being a great athlete. Or
all other dreams go out the window unless that dream is fulfilled.
You have to be there, right? The more unhealthy you are, the less of you shows up, right? Which creates a lot of problem in relationships. For example, if I'm in this relationship with you like we are right now, and I'm 10% not here because I'm fantasizing about food or having sex or whatever, most people think, well, that creates a 10% deficit in the relationship. But in actuality, there's 10% of me not here, and there's 10% that you can't access, which means there's a 20% deficit in the relationship. Now, I drove 3.5 hours to get here to be with you today. So I'll ask you a question. If my wife plugs in an address that's 20% wrong, will I ever get home tonight? It's only 120 miles to my house, but 20% wrong means I'll end up in Mexico or in the Pacific Ocean or in, Nevada or something, right? So when you look at how important communication is in our life and how important it is to be present in relationships, the more of you that's out of balance with those 4 doctors, the more of you is trapped in some kind of either unconscious withhold, some kind of unconscious habit pattern, or you're distracted by something. So you actually can't be present with yourself and you can't be present in your relationship. So what you see is those dragons just multiply their problems until you kind of burn your dragons out. And what do we call that? First, it starts up as fatigue, then it becomes anxiety, then it becomes depression, and it ends in suicide. That's the scenario. You see it, I've watched it 1 billion times in my career. So do you see, in a nutshell, you can take a lot of data and you can get clear on what is it you love enough to grow and change for, because without that, all I can do is throw pills at you for the rest of your life. 2, I have to identify where the key imbalances are within the key systems of the body, right? I have to look at, thermoregulatory system. I've got to look at rhythm, pressure, and flow, your heart and your breathing mechanism. I've got to look at how you're accumulating and utilizing energy, for example. Without going through all the systems, I have to make sure that you have the resources on board to fuel the autonomically regulated systems. And it's interesting because I use a very comprehensive questionnaire with all my patients that analyzes 29 different systems in the body, from, hormonal glands to digestive to brain to, all the systems of the body. And I show my students, because they're in training, so they have to go through the process themselves. So I often grab, I got all these, badass kettlebell lifters and, dick swinging contests and all this, the macho people, right? Or the people that think they're experts in nutrition. I say, okay, let me see your health appraisal questionnaire. Look, you have, of 29 systems here, you've got like 16 of them right off the top of the chart. So I ask them this question: do you realize these are all autonomically regulated? And they think for a minute. They go, yeah, they are. I go, good. Do you know what the function of these systems is? And they go blank usually. So your autonomic systems are designed to keep you alive. And based on this assessment, you're very close to dying because you are so poorly managed that even your own internal systems that are designed to keep you healthy, I said, realize there's not a single cell in your body that wants to be sick. None of them. But every one of your cells believes your mind as though it is God, and I can prove it to you. All I got to do is have you think a negative thought and do a muscle test on you. You'll test weak every time. Then think a happy, positive thought, and you'll get stronger immediately. And I can even use a force transducer to measure it scientifically and objectively every time. Your mind tells your cells what is real, and they obey because they're unconsciously governed. So the point I'm making is if you don't pay attention to the 4 doctors I just mentioned, you will always have autonomic dysregulation problems, and you can only go so far before something's got to go. Something's got to collapse. Simply put, there's 3 primary hormones in the human body: insulin, adrenaline, and cortisol. Without them, you're dead. You run out of insulin, you're dead. You run out of cortisol, you are dead. All the rest of those hormones improve the quality of life. So when I look at anybody, I look right away to see what are the indicators of too much adrenaline, too much or not enough cortisol, or imbalances in the production of insulin, too high or too low of blood sugar, or oscillating back and forth, because that tells me the ramifications of the choices you're making with those 4 doctors. And my job as a therapist is to guide you to balance those 3 primary hormones, or you're going to be dead. And on the way to being dead, you'll be partially dead, which means I don't have the agency to create in my life. I don't have the agency to contribute. I don't have the agency to be present in my relationships. I don't have the agency to be responsible in my parenting, in my management as a business owner. And what people often don't realize is that all love comes with responsibility. There is no such thing as love without responsibility. If you love your dog, you got a responsibility to care for it. If you love yourself, you have a responsibility to care for it. If you love your children, you have to have enough agency to execute responsibility. But we've got a culture now that wants love without responsibility, and that's what an addiction is. An addiction is an attempt to get safe love that comes without responsibility, almost always because love has been so painful that they have to find a way to feel loved without responsibility. And there we have a paradox.
That understanding you just gave is so comprehensive, and I know it just touches the tip of the iceberg of your work and how deep things go, but it's so helpful to be able to examine for all the listeners right now, where internally are we at within the scale of the developmental journey, and where are those doctors out of balance from Dr. Happiness to
It's
quiet.
comprehensive, but it's really simple. What do I love enough to grow for and become? Where am I out of balance with the feminine, which is the anabolic, which is linked highly to your parasympathetic nervous system, your digest, metabolize, assimilate, regenerate, and recovery and growth system, versus your sympathetic fight or flight. Remember, yin multiplies power and resources, feminine. Yang spends and utilizes energy and resources. So the most common deficit of all diseases is I spend more energy and resources than I accumulate. It's just like a bank account. Health problems are almost always, a crisis of accounting.
Yeah, we're in energetic debt.
It's an accounting problem.
Yeah.
and I'm saying, look, there's four books you have to keep as an accountant: happiness, quiet, diet, and movement. And you got to keep those 4 in balance, because you cannot be a healthy 3-doctor person. It's impossible. And I studied philosophies all over the world, from Kung Fu to religious philosophies to Rastafarianism, you name it. I looked all and said, how many doctors do they have? I couldn't find a single 4-doctor system in the world. And that's why I had to create it, right?
Now, you mentioned that it's quite frequently we see people building momentum towards the negative spiral of anxiety to depression towards suicide. And yet, as we come into balance with those 2 dragons and our chief aim and vision for life and the 4 doctors, we can build a spiral towards the positive. And most of us just simply don't know how good it can possibly feel to be a human being.
Well, we don't, but we have examples to look for, right? If you're a martial artist, look for the great ones that are imbalanced. If you're a great teacher, you'll find that the great teachers are vital people because they're living true to their love. There's always examples there. It's just that we are surrounded by pseudo experts, and it makes it hard for people to distinguish, which is why I always say, never judge a man by the creed he or she professes, but by the life he or she leads. Right? You don't look at the degree behind their name. Look at whether or not they're an example of that level of mastery. So that's what I did. I traveled the world looking for real examples. I'm sitting here with you. I'm a pretty skilled person at reading bodies, right? You got beautiful skin. You smile a lot. You got good posture. You breathe through your belly. You're calm. You're centered. You're present with me. Should I keep going? You got arches in your feet. Your structure's healthy. You move like you're in yourself. Now, you don't need my training to know that. We all pick that up unconsciously when we're with people.
But it's good to hear, reaffirm from you.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Who pays attention, yeah.
So what I'm saying is, it's unlikely that you're going to have to come pay me the kind of money I charge because you have a crisis of 4 doctors, because you're aware enough as a human being to say, I'm not feeling well, or I can't calm my mind, or I'm really stressed about, and then say, how do I resolve this? But if you allow yourself to get into an energy crisis, you will come to the point where the thought of actually having to do the work to manage those 4 doctors is so daunting that you're probably going to reach for a drug to prop you up. And by the time the drug gives you the energy to get the education you need, now you're dealing with an addiction. And now you're going to need more energy to go through the withdrawal process. So it's far better to teach these things to your children so that they have this awareness before they get into that trap, which is constantly being sold to us through social media and media, right? We're being taught how to be unhealthy because we're highly profitable that way. But do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I look at your assistant. I forgot your
name.
Chelsea. I'm sorry. I had it for a while there. But look, like, she's in herself. She's got a beautiful energy field. When I get next to her, she doesn't shift me all around. Neither do you. Like, when you're balanced like I am, I stand next to someone. If they've got small intestine problems, my small intestine starts to wind up. I immediately know this person's got small intestine. If their neck hurts, my neck starts to hurt. We're all doing that to each other, but most people are not healthy enough to sense it. Because at the unconscious level, we're all connected. We're deeply connected. Once you go to the collective unconscious, we're all breathing the same air. We're all operating off the same archetypes. That's what tarot is. It's a system of archetypes that we all use to make meaning. This, no matter what people like about tarot or not, the first question you should have is, why has this system been around for so long? Because it's a fundamental truth that no matter what your judgment is, you're dealing with the archetypal reality of the human psyche. So the point I'm making is, the unconscious works largely on archetypes because that's how we make meaning. And when I'm next to somebody, the unconscious is telling me what information is in their archetypes because it's carried in their energy field and it's overlapping with my field. So, the simple example is, how much piss can you put in a glass of beer before you don't want to drink it? Right? Well, most people would say none. And
Unless you're one of those urine drinkers.
Well, that's a different story. And then we have to remember they're urine drinkers because they were sick to begin with. But you see the point I'm making as an analogy. When you are in my presence and I'm in yours, we are actually becoming each other.
Yep.
Right? We are becoming each other.
So important.
And when I work with a patient, the analysis of the paper and the measuring of their body for me is only to prove what I already know, because I have to be professional about it.
Yep.
But it usually, I don't even have to see the person. If you really want me to be honest, I can touch a person's handwriting and see what it's doing to me because their whole energy signature is in their handwriting.
It's so powerful because what somebody who's so desensitized and numb would need heroin to feel, if you raise sensitivity in yourself, simply looking at a flower could arrive, get you to arrive there.
Yeah.
And you're so spot on by saying how it's not just what we know, but the embodiment of what we know that really transform people. I think often the people that I invite to have on this podcast and have conversation with, it's not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it, who is saying it, where it's coming from, and how it's being said that actually impacts people and touches their heart and leads to transformation.
I tell my students all the time, you can ask any of them, I say, do not believe a word I'm telling you. You should test everything I teach you and own it yourself. And if there's anything I'm teaching you that turns out to be wrong, it is your responsibility to bring it to me. And I will tell you the first thing I'm going to do is have you demonstrate it to me first. So far, 100% of the time, they were doing it wrong. And when I corrected them and said, now go test it, it worked. Well, I don't teach things that I haven't tested over and over again because I don't want the karma of misleading people. And I tell my students, I am Paul Chek. At this moment, I'm 62 years old. You let me know how you'd like to test me. You want to go in the gym? Do you want to meditate together? Do you want to do Tai Chi together? Whatever it is, all I have to show you is the results of the philosophy that I've built for you. And if I can't demonstrate it to you, you should get the hell out of here quick. And that's what's missing in our education system. When you have sick people teaching health and confused people teaching science, and then we can get to religion. I'll sum this one up in a hurry. Do you know who Shankara is?
Sounds familiar.
Shankara is a very famous Hindu philosopher sage. At the age of 8, Shankara began walking around the country of India looking for the most famous gurus of the day to debate them. He never lost a single debate in his life starting at 8 years old, although he came very close to losing one with a wife of a yogi one time, which is written up in, I think it's his, there's more than one book, but The Crest Jewel of Discrimination by Shankara is very powerful. Shankara said something profound. No man can understand scripture until he is enlightened. And when he is enlightened, he does not need scripture. Would you agree with that?
I think it depends how you define what it is to understand, which
it means to understand what the actual teaching is.
Yeah, to actually get the thing, because words ultimately always fail us.
And not only that, words can mean many things.
Right.
Okay, so here's the point. I say to my patients, how many of your Sunday school teachers were enlightened? None of them. How many of your pastors and preachers and bishops and clergy were enlightened? You're lucky if you found one that was truly enlightened. So what you've just gotten is an indoctrination into the cut and paste ideas of somebody else. But the only way you'll ever know if it's true if you go deep enough into yourself to actually find the fundamental truths that the founders of these religions were describing. And then you might agree or disagree. But as I shared in my podcast, if you look at the parallel sayings of Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, and Lao Tzu, they were all saying the same things. But you have to actually take the time to study them to learn what it was they were saying. And all you can do is look at the words and agree at an intellectual level if you haven't penetrated yourself deep enough to understand that they really are telling the truth, right? So if you understand that, then the enlightened person knows it doesn't matter what religion you're studying. If you get to the fundamental truths or the poetic truth that's behind the words, they're all saying the same thing. Know thyself. That's what they're saying. And when you do, you find that we are all expressions of the one love. We're all exactly like Bob Marley sang to us over and over again, one love. And so the point is, enlightenment is also a very elusive word, but really it means I'm in touch with the fundamental reality that is behind the phenomenal illusions we call life, right? Somebody who's enlightened knows the difference between the show, which is impermanent, and where it's coming from, which is eternal. That's the difference.
So much of what you're pointing to is helping us arrive ultimately to the place where we start to listen to silence. And I find silence often has a lot to say.
I tell my students all the time, you're going to find something, really interesting about silence. It's explosive.
Yeah.
And I can prove it to you. The universe is here. And it came out of silence. And silence is so full of itself, it can't help but create. And what do? We go to sleep at night. We wake up in the morning. And how many times have you said to yourself, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep in the morning. I'm going to sleep in until noon. Sun comes up. You, oh, geez, I don't want to get up. I want to stay in bed. But you've got so much energy, you got to go do something, right? So you see, when you go into silence and you shut your monkey mind off, you accumulate enough energy. It wants to create. Man, that's like been the story of my life. My wife estimated that I've written somewhere between 15 and 25,000 pages of course manuals. I've probably written somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 700 published articles. I've produced somewhere in the neighborhood of I've got 1,100 plus videos on YouTube. I've produced probably over 100 professionally produced videos that are education systems. Spirit Gym is 3,000 pages. That's 15 volumes. I mean, you see my point? I've produced hundreds and hundreds of paintings. I got 3 kids and a grandkid. I mean, all I'm simply saying is when you're a healthy person and you have a connection to that for which there is no other, what you really are, then that shines through you and it's unstoppable. Like, I'm going to die when I am done, not for any other reason. I'm going to die when I say, okay, I've given my gift to the world. I'm going to go play in another dimension now, But for me, it's just really, I want to make sure my kids are equipped for the craziness of the world, because I got surprised at 54 and became a daddy again, which is the last thing I thought I wanted, but it blew my heart wide open. And then Zoe came 3 years later, and so here I am, almost 63, with an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 43-year-old and a grandson. So, in other words, what I'm saying is before my kids came, I was feeling that I'd pretty much given the world what I wanted to give it. And so I was at a place where if lightning struck, it would be okay. Like, okay, because for me, I'm a remote viewer and I have a much bigger sense of the universe than most people do, or multi-dimensions. So for me, the world is just like one little stop on a grand tour that's infinitely large. And I've remote viewed and worked with, very evolved teachers in other dimensions and on places like Venus and the sun. And I've spent time, I speak to Carl Jung on the other side. I speak to Osho. I speak to Rudolf Steiner, anybody. All of them, they're all accessible. I mean, that's a whole other story, but I've got, a great podcast with Angie, Chek, and Sally Crow on death and beyond. And we talk about exactly these things. But these, if most people really knew the fundamental truths of, kind of God's little game, remember this. The second law of thermodynamics says energy produced cannot be destroyed, only transformed. And Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli spent years trying to really scientifically identify what the psyche or the soul was. And they concluded that at one end, it's pure energy, and at the other end, it's matter. And the 7 chakras string pure energy or God consciousness as a rainbow bridge between the highest dimension of the infinite, eternal now, with the physical reality of matter. And we live in that rainbow bridge. And so you can think of our spiritual evolution as that 7-step ladder. Now, the Egyptians have models going up to 21 steps and the Taoists have 3. But the reality of it, it's a rainbow bridge. And all I'm saying is I reached the point where I said, I'm going to cross and see what, go visit some other people and some other places. But then my kids came along. I think it was this great spirit saying, hey, don't get too excited to wander yet because you got work to do here. And when my kids reoriented me to the life of children, I now began being much more aware of, what they're trying to do to children, how they're all these vaccinations. And I started doing a lot more research on that. And boy, did I get my mind blown. I knew a lot already, but when I started looking into this, it was shocking. And then I looked at the health of children. I looked at the education of children. I studied Steiner's Waldorf system. I studied the Montessori system. I looked at what was in the education system that I grew up in, which I'd spent my whole life dealing with. But what happened was the kids made me realize that if I leave the world because I am ready to go somewhere else, before I do everything I can do to educate my children as to how to navigate this world and do as much as I can to help all parents understand the absolute highest responsibility as a human being is to nurture your children into their genius so that they can do what they came to the world to do, which is almost always to bring us a gift. It is always to bring us a gift. Then I will probably have to reincarnate to finish what I didn't finish. So it's almost like my kids came to me to say, Daddy, you can't go yet. And then, Angie, my second wife, is an amazing mother and a very, very powerful shaman and a very, very skilled, she's got many degrees, like Penny. And she also is a great farmer, and she studies a lot on childhood development and Steiner teachings and goes to very profound meetings on childhood development with Steiner teachers. And she's an expert at biogeometry, and she's got a degree in nutrition. So Great Spirit brought her into my life. So her, Penny, and I function as a triangle of support for each other. And so through Angie's research, what Penny knows, what I know, and what we keep learning, I really realized, and this led to the development of Spiritism. I was like, okay, most native societies thought 7 generations ahead. They didn't make a decision to do something that would antagonize at least 7 generations because they knew it would wipe out their people. Well, we don't think even 1 generation ahead. I could give you 100 things that we're doing that are guaranteeing that the children on this planet are going to have a ball buster of existence. And anyone smart enough to listen to your podcast knows for sure I'm telling the truth. And so I said, I can't just run from this. I spent my whole life studying health, holism, everything that we have to be aware of to be healthy people, which is utterly dependent on this planet. And is utterly dependent on our education systems, and is utterly dependent on our food supply, and it's utterly dependent on our water and our air. And I don't know if you ever heard it, but I was on Brian Rose's podcast at the beginning of COVID, and he was brave enough to ask me what I really thought was going on. I said, let me tell you something. You should not be thinking about COVID right now. That's a pimple on an elephant's ass compared to the issues we have going on with our soil, our oceans, our access to drinking water, to the toxicity of the air we're breathing, and the fundamental things that we all need together to have the dream board even exist. Because Earth is where we come to live out our dreams and play together and grow together and create together. And it is utterly dependent on the health of our soil, our oceans, our rivers, our streams, our water, and our skies. And I don't care what color you are. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what your political affiliation is. If you are not thinking about what's going on with those things, which are all in disastrous states right now, then you are seriously and dangerously distracted from the real issues. And government knows this but ignores it. Big industry knows this but ignores it. We cannot afford to know this and ignore it because, well, you already gave us the statistics on young people just a few minutes ago. And I do not want my kid nor any other child to be burdened with our ignorance, our stupidity, and our laziness. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is, even though I was ready to do a dimension shift, my kids grounded me in the reality that I must help people wake up to our responsibility to our children and to the kingdom of nature. We have got to stop perceiving nature as objects we can do whatever the hell we want with. And that is scientific materialism. You look at who the guru of the World Economic Forum experts, Klaus Schwab, Yuval Noah Harari, etc., it's Adler, who was a behavioralist, who thought that animals had no feelings and emotions and that they were just biological animals and you can cut them open and do whatever you want to them. That's the mentality we've got that's coming into government now. This is, forgive the expression, this is serious shit. And you can't just do your asanas and pretend this shit's not happening. We have got to get involved with each other. We've got to dream together. But you see the fundamental point I'm making, just like there's 4 doctors, you can't have those 4 doctors if you don't have the ecosystem healthy. So for my students, I developed a model called the ECHO. E for energy, C for chemistry, H for hydration, O for organisms. Whatever we do to the environment that changes the energy, the chemistry, the quality of the water, and how healthy the organisms are, we eat, breathe, and drink, and it does it exactly to us. So we've got to wake up to the fact that whatever we do in our environment, we do to ourselves, and whatever we do to ourselves to diminish ourselves makes us less conscious, and we keep doing stupid shit to the environment. So somewhere we've got to say, okay, we're the ones making this pendulum swing. Have you ever seen a bear start a forest fire?
No, I've never personally seen that.
Right? Have you ever seen a chipmunk smoke itself to death?
No.
Have you ever seen a giraffe get stoned on heroin and give up on its responsibilities?
No, but that's quite the image.
But you see the point I'm making?
Yeah. We're
doing it to them. They are not doing it to us. Remember I told you I connected to the plants and they said, where are the people? They used to talk to us. What's wrong with your people keep killing us? Well, nature is inherently intelligent, but it does not have a cerebral cortex, thank God, or we'd all be dead because they would all be driving Ferraris and spending money they don't have and doing all the crap we're doing. This might sound like too heavy for a lot of people, but the reality of it is it all starts with you. You keep spending money on junk. You keep buying poison food. They keep making it. You keep supporting commercial farming. They keep poisoning your soils.
Yeah, we vote with our dollar.
You keep pretending there's no chemtrails in the sky, filling your lungs with aluminum and barium and other crap. They keep spraying it. You think Donald Trump's going to rescue you? You need a very cold shower. That's what kept me in the game.
Yeah.
That's why I still keep myself in shape, because I must carry the responsibility of love. And I love this planet. I have a profound connection with the Black Madonna, who is really Mother Earth. And she appears to me, she comes to me and speaks to me, usually in meditation. When I'm in meditation, I least expect it, and all of a sudden there she is. But she looks like about a 65-year-old Aboriginal woman, very black and very beautiful and very loving. And she tells me, Paul, this is what you came here to do. This is what you need to be aware of. You must inspire people to wake up. You, children, you are my children, but you are going through puberty. And you are now entering a crisis of adulthood. And if you do not take responsibility for your relationship to nature, you will have a very challenging initiation, and many of you will not make it. And she said, I cannot intervene, or you will never become adults. And that can be hard to hear from Mother, but she knows that we've got to grow up. And she's sacrificing herself so we can grow up.
It is such a privilege to bear the responsibility we are uniquely here to hold. And man, I just feel that the love that you have so much for this work and to show up for the planet that you care so much about, I feel it so strongly just emanate from who you are and the mission that you're here to carry out. And I'm so grateful for it. And I feel like I've only gotten to maybe cover half of what I wanted to cover, because I could today in this conversation with you, because there's so much depth in what you're sharing, and so many different tangents to explore and see how they're all connected. I often say that when we get quiet what needs to be heard will get loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you spent many periods in your life clarifying the capacity you have to listen to yourself.
Yes.
And had a very challenging childhood, and many people would not have expected that you would have emerged as you are today from the challenges that you, in one way, were afforded for the necessary refinement for your soul's evolution. But I'm just so grateful for it, man, because you're a gift to everybody that gets to listen to your experience, your wisdom. And we need elders, we need guides, we need people that can synthesize this information and deliver it with urgency, because right now we need these messages.
Well, it can be daunting, and when you look at everything we've been talking about, we are in pretty big trouble. But I would like to share, many of my students with tears in their eyes often say, Paul, how do I even begin to tackle any of this stuff? It's so great. It's so massive. It's scary. I don't even know where to begin. It's like I've got to move a mountain with a teaspoon. And this is my response to them. Use your heart to feel what you know. Give love where you can give love. Do what you love to do. If you love to sing, sing the truth. If you love to write, write the truth. If you love to dance, dance the truth. If you love to paint, paint the truth. If you love to talk, start a podcast and share the truth. If you just do what you love to do with the intention of bringing awareness to and taking action on the things that are most important. I mean, look, if we understood the importance of supporting organic farmers, biodynamic farmers, regenerative free-range animal farmers, and we shifted 50% of the money going to the commercial food industry into the hands of those people who should be national heroes, who are enhancing the quality of the soils and enhancing the ability for us to regenerate topsoil, the world would change rapidly. And those large food corporations would go out of business because 50% loss of income would radically shift everything, and the water would start cleaning up, the skies would start clearing up, people would start thinking more rationally. They wouldn't believe a damn thing Bill Gates says. That would be the first thing that happened when he got healthy. You'd realize this guy is the epitome of a con man. I mean, it's like when people tell me how much they love Bill Gates, I say, okay, I don't even need to do an assessment on you. We need to start right with 4 doctors and get right down to basics here, because, you're very lost. And do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you just honestly say, what would love do now? And just do whatever you can do. Even if it's just starting a garden, if it's just hugging more people, if it's donating to organizations that are doing a good job. Like, I love giving money to Robert F. Kennedy because he's got real values. I love giving money to the Children's Health Defense because they publish real scientific information and articles by authors that are mature, intelligent, wise people. And I want them to succeed. It's important for me that they say, I support the Weston A. Price Foundation. I support the Price Pottinger Foundation. I support the British Soil Association. There's no such thing as a political system that's ever done anything, but there is such thing as controlling what you energize with your money. I tell my patients all the time, don't water weeds, which means don't keep putting energy into the thoughts that are disempowering you or that are scaring you. You must learn to pull those weeds. In fact, I brought you a gift. I forgot. I brought you a gift to show you how to do that. Would you like me to get it for you?
Another one? You brought me like 4 gifts already.
Oh, yes, but I brought you something to address this very issue.
Please, yeah.
I thought it would be good for us to teach your listeners and viewers how to manage your mind.
That sounds pretty good to me.
I'm going to show you a technique that I developed that anybody can do that will help you clear your mind up and live your dream beautifully. Shall I go get it?
Please.
Watch this. Take that out of the package.
All right. These are the 2 dragons, huh?
You got it, baby.
Yin and yang.
This is called the Chek Mind Flip coin.
Wow.
This plastic's stuck together here. Now, you can do this with any coin, but I designed this to be something special that's a little heavier So when it's in your pocket, you can feel it and you can find it easily, or in your purse. If you're a woman, you can find it easier. And so the white represents a positive thought. The negative yin represents a negative thought. So let's either make one up, or you share with me a thought that comes across your mind occasionally that isn't something you really want to live out or you don't want to have to deal with.
I mean, one thing was coming to mind was that the solutions to everything we're talking about need to be figured out with the mind.
Okay, so is that the thought?
It's more so, yeah, that life needs to be figured out.
Okay, so the thought is life needs to be figured out. Are you assigning that that's negative for you?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, good. So if I hear you right, the challenge is that everything needs to be figured out with the mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you please state your dream in regard to that challenging thought?
To live in the embodied realization that the heart's intelligence is guiding us to where we need to be.
Fantastic. That's your dream. Now turn the coin over and take that thought, everything has to be figured out with the mind, and state a positive thought that is in alignment with your dream. So if you energize it, you become dream affirmative.
So a positive thought affirming the dream.
Take that negative and flip it over to something you can buy into wholeheartedly.
The heart knows the way.
Good. So every time you think the thought, things have to be figured out with the mind, and maybe that's challenging for you, you say, thank you, dear pain teacher, for showing me where I have a mind virus. State the dream like you just did. It doesn't have to be figured out with the mind. I can do it through the heart and through love. Flip the coin over. State the positive that's true, that supports that. Energize it with your love and be that person, even if it's in the moment. Just say, I choose to live from my heart and know that I can get past the head, because the head's always partial. I want to go to the wholeness of love. And over time, what will happen is you will build a new neural network. And to the degree you emotionalize that and visualize yourself as that person, you'll accelerate the rate the new neural network comes. And when it becomes efficient enough, it will no longer run the old pathway.
Sounds great.
And you use the coin, because if you only do it in your head, you only get the mental component of the change. Creation emerges in 3 phases: thought, word, deed. So the act of thinking it is step 1 of creation. The act of saying it runs the vibration through your body, and you understand cymatics. You're actually energizing your cells with the vibration that's congruent with the intention of your positive statement in your dream. So when you state the positive and you emotionalize it, the act of holding the coin and flipping it brings you into deed. And because that's a motor act, you're bringing it right down into your brainstem, spinal cord, and your muscles, and you literally wear it. So now I'm going to go back to the story of me and boxing.
Okay.
Remember I said we spent hours and hours doing the most basic, ridiculous drills? Well, boxers used to say to the coach, why do we have to do this? We've been boxing for years. We're experts. You don't have to, why do we have to do this? And the coaches would always say, because if somebody knocks you out on your feet, your body needs to know how to fight when your head's not there. So what I say to my patients and my students, when I keep repeating things over and over to them, and they say, why do you keep saying that? I say, have you ever cut the head off of a chicken with an axe and let it go? And a lot of them, 6 or 8 people in a room of 40 or 50 say, yes, I have. I say, what happens to the chicken? Does it just fall over dead, or does it run across the yard with blood squirting everywhere? They say, it runs across the yard. I say, I have a question for you. How did it run across the yard without its head unless it knows how to move its body at the level of the spinal cord and the body itself? Doesn't that mean the information on how to run is below the brain? Yes. Well, that's what you do when you repeat things over and over again that are dream affirmative. You bring it out of the head you just talked about and you embody it. So the act of flipping the coin takes the belief that you associate with the dream and it embodies it, so that when your head's busy, your body knows what to do, which is why I teach my patients their first assignment, and my students, and in Spirit Gym, the first thing you learn in Spirit Gym, if you watch any of my calls, We're going to sing each of the songs I wrote for the 4 doctors 4 times a day, every day, until you can do it drunk, stoned, walking backwards, and unconscious, because that's your code. And when you make that in your, and this is what a myth is, and this is why they were acted out and ritualized and sang, so that it became an unconscious guidance system. So here's an example. Dr. Happy is the dreamer, Dr. Happy is the dreamer, Dr. Happy is the dreamer, don't you know? Dr. Happy sets your rhythms set your pressure, and your rhythms and your pressure make your flow. And your rhythms and your pressure make your flow. Ho, ho. So what did I just say? Dr. Happy is the dreamer. If you're not happy, you're not dreaming, you're giving yourself a nightmare. Dr. Happy sets your rhythms, because if you understand Dr. Happiness is responsible for Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Quiet, that is what you establish throughout your day, your daily rhythm. Your rhythm sets your pressure. What happens when your rhythms are too fast or too slow? Your sense of pressure is off because you're out of balance. If you try to stack too much into a day, you get too hyper, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, and you end up at a doctor's office. So your rhythms set your pressure, and your rhythms and your pressure make your flow. See, if you're under a lot of pressure to get something done, but you love to do it, that's what Hans Seeley called eustress, useful stress, growing you.
Yeah. Like preparing for this podcast is that for me, which is, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. If you're under pressure because you're in the gym, but you want to make something beautiful out of yourself, that's useful stress.
Yeah.
But if you're in distress, it breaks you down.
Yeah.
So your rhythms and your pressure, the type of pressure, if it's not dream affirmative pressure, it's not building you, it's breaking you down. So your rhythms and your pressure make your flow. What's your flow? It's your sense of how things are going in your life. How's the flow of your day? How's the flow of your relationship? How's the flow of your money? How's the flow of your sex life? You know, when we see someone dancing beautifully, they have a beautiful flow. They're in the groove. When someone's great at lifting weights, they know how to find the groove. A great athlete knows how to find the groove. They're in their flow. What is a flow state? It's not thinking. It's beyond thinking. It's what you were just talking about. So your rhythms and your pressure set your flow. Ho, ho. Santa Claus has delivered the truth. Right? I mean, I could go through all the songs, but you see, I wrote these songs knowing that for thousands of years, we learned by verbal communication, by singing, and by memorizing myths and the key things that were essential for survival. We didn't write shit down. In fact, a lot of the greatest teachers said, as soon as you start writing stuff down, you're going to ruin people's ability to learn, because they're not going to embody it. They're going to have it on a notebook and forget all about it.
Yeah, externalize it.
Yep. So you see, when you sing it, you go through thought, word, deed. So Dr. Diet, build your temple, a body for your mind. You raise and eat your food with love. It makes your chemistry. Add good water and a smile. Be filled with energy. Eat good organics and be wise. You are what you eat. Eat good organics and be wise. You are what you eat. You are what you eat. Yum, yum. Dr. Movement animates life. Dr. Movement animates life. Dr. Movement is the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon. The sun works out. The moon works in. The sun works out. The moon works in. And that determines the temperature you are in. Woo! The balance of those 2 doctors determines the temperature you're in. What do we got right now? A worldwide epidemic of metabolic syndrome, inflammatory syndromes, people that are overheated and falling apart, and every biochemical reaction in your body is temperature dependent. So you can tell how healthy a person is at a general level by the temperature of their body. Too cold, you got hypothyroid issues. Too hot, you got inflammatory issues, or you're overly excited, or you're overly stressed, or you're breaking down. Okay? Dr. Quiet, she is yin, know how she loves to bring energy in. Dr. Quiet, she is yin, know how she loves to bring energy in. She teaches you how to rest, so your energy is always at its best. Hey! There you go.
They need to teach these in school.
I have
elementary school.
I've got a couple of my students are school teachers. They've started 4 doctors clubs. But my point is, in Spirit Gym, my Spirit Gym training program, that's your first job, is to sing those songs 4 times a day, every day, till you can do it singing, walk backwards, stoned and drunk. choose your drug. You should still be able to do it. And if you don't have the discipline to sing those 4 doctor songs 4 times a day, you will never have the discipline to go through the metamorphosis of a real spiritual growth and development process.
Paul, thank you for this coin. I'm going to use it.
You'll be surprised how powerful it is.
Thank you, man. This podcast has been so nourishing, so fulfilling, so deep, and I'm sure we'll have many in the future to continue down all of these explorations.
I hope so.
I just want to make space for sharing a little bit about Spirit Gym, where people can find your work. We'll link everything down in the description below.
Sure. Well, a couple of things. The Institute's website, which has lots of things like online training programs. We have an online training program based on my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, which I believe the program is now called Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. For the public, that's our public program. We have Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1, which is also a public program. So it's a step more comprehensive. My book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, is on Amazon. You can get it anywhere. We published it ourselves. It's our 20th anniversary. Everything in it is exactly true to this very day because it's all based on basics and fundamental principles. We've sold over 230,000 copies, which is a lot for a self-published book. So you can get that anywhere, which is really like essential. And it's probably the only book in the world that I know of that you go through a series of questionnaires that analyze how much stress you have in key systems in the body. And then you can follow the directions and it tells you which chapters to read and apply, which muscles to stretch, which joints to mobilize. And 1,000 people use the book, you can get 1,000 different programs out of it. So it shows you how to customize the use of the book specifically for you as an individual. Spirit Gym is myspiritgym.com. So it's based on a 1-year subscription program, which you can either buy up front, then you have full access to all the master key lessons, which cover all the things you need to understand to have a legitimate spiritual growth practice to get yourself healthy. It includes the 6 foundation principles, the 4 doctors, and much more. It's really a combination of health basics, but it gives you a metaphysical structure. So I call it a meta-myth structure. So that it doesn't matter whether you're an atheist, a Christian, a Muslim, or whoever you are, it takes you through the principles that are essential to understand because they're what makes a story live and breathe. And it allows you to have time to ask yourself, is it working for me? Is my religion working for me? Is my this or that dogma working for me? Is it true that everybody should be a vegetarian? Is it working for me? Is it true you should just eat a pile of meat? There's 2 sides to every coin, right? So in essence, it's based on 10 principles. Principle 1 is being. So what does it mean to be in a state of being? What is being? 2, duality. So then you get into the function of the mind, subject-object duality, lover, beloved, I, thou. So it shows you how duality is at work and why duality is essential to consciousness. 3 is the dreaming trinity. So it shows you how all the world religions had holy trinities. Many sciences have them, many philosophies have them, but it shows you what the holy trinity is, why it's an archetype and why it's always at work. And if you're unconscious, it works just as well as when you're conscious. So it manifests your unconscious dreams as nightmares as well as dreams. So I show you how spirit manifests itself in form. 4 is the principle of the 4, which is the principle of completion. It's the principle of wholeness. It is the elements earth, water, fire, and air. So how does the dreaming trinity of the 3 manifest in the 4, which is embodiment? There's many 4s, such as the cycle of Om, AUM _. There's the 4 life process archetypes, child, warrior, king, queen, wise man, that we all can evolve through. So some of them have multiple applications. The principle of the 5 is the 5 program design factors that you must address to develop a effective program physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. It's also the principle of the archetype 5 in Tarot, the Hierophant. What is a real spiritual guide or a real mentor? How do you know when you need one and what are the qualities you're looking for? And the 5 also deals with Hegel's thesis, antithesis, synthesis process. So the 5 is the antithesis stage. You fall in love, you think you're going to live happily ever after, but 5 years later, you're fighting like cats and dogs. There's the antithesis. You come up with a dream for a cool widget. You think you're going to save the world. You go into production and testing, and the thing keeps breaking down. You realize the materials you used aren't good enough, or the FDA has some law, so you have to go through the antithesis stage. So it shows you how to go through the challenge of a process and get to synthesis and the importance of rest after each cycle, and also correlates to the hero's journey. The 6 is nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement. So I have lessons on each of those, sometimes multiple lessons, such as the mind. There's multiple lessons. I got 2 lessons on hydration because of the importance of water. The 7 is the principle of the soul and the spirit. So I show you what the 7 chakras are, how they function, how they integrate with the body, and what is the soul and what is the spirit, and why is that important to understand. 8 is the principle of self-reflection. So you understand the importance of introspection, meditation, and deepening your relationship with yourself, and shadow work and how to go about doing it. 9 is a new state of awareness. So now that you've been practicing this for a while and you're awake on a new level, how do you keep that going and not fall back into your habit patterns or fall off the wagon, as the AA people would say? And 10 is a new level of being. So now you've completed one growth and development cycle, or you've gone through one hero's journey cycle. So how do you celebrate that and go into a redreaming state? So 10 means you're at the beginning of a new cycle, but before you jump into just anything, how do you spend some time with your soul and get clear guidance on what the next authentic expression of your unique self is? So there's about close to 70 lessons, probably something around 60 to 100 hours of online training. And we meet each week, and I guide you through new lessons, new tactics, new approaches. And I also reinforce some of the key learning points. And then I open the floor for answering. I let you have access to me as your mentor for whatever is going on in your life, from health to relationship to questions on the lessons to anything that I can support you with. And we all get to learn how to apply these principles because almost everybody's got a problem that somebody else has. So by being in the Sangha, is what I call it, you get to see how I address somebody with depression or someone who is having a hard time accessing their soul. And I also have mentors. So if a question comes up that's too deep for me to really have the time to focus on, a mentor can take you on the side into a breakout room and on Zoom, and then they can spend more time with you. And if you want, you can hire the mentor for private therapy or coaching. And so it's really a system I designed to say, hey, it's better to dream awake than be unconscious. It's better to do what you love to do. It's better to understand the basic principles of how to be a healthy person so you can express your soul's genius in the world. And here are the master key principles. The master key is actually a key that I designed that is, once you master these 10 principles, you have the key to any door. You can create whatever you want, and you're going to grow efficiently as a spiritual person, and you will grow from sex and violence love to conditional love to empathetic and passionate love and compassionate to unconditional love. And, that's really enlightened. What I show my students is something quite interesting. They say, well, how do you know when you're enlightened? I said, well, 1, you're lighter in your step. You don't carry so much baggage. 2, if you look at the word evolution, which by definition means little to big, you start off small and you get bigger and bigger. Your evolution of knowledge, you get more and more knowledge. Involution is big to little. If you look at the word evolution, if you write it down, I don't have a piece of paper and a pen, but you can write the word evolution down, write it in big letters and leave a little space between the letters. And then if you read it backwards, you'll see N-O, put a dash there. You'll see I-T, put a dash there. Then you'll see U, put a dash before and after the U. And then you'll see L-O-V-E. And if you read it backward, it says, know it you love. So when you have evolved to be enlightened, you don't love the chicken or the sports car or the gold in the bank any more or less than you love life itself, because you know it's all God manifesting, and all of it is the divine, and there is no it you love anymore, and you are free from the bondage of possession and dogma and belief systems, and you just look at the show and say, there's God right in front of you, inside you. You're eating, sleeping, breathing, and pooping God. You're walking on God. You're warring with God. You're hugging God. You're giving birth to God. You're drinking God. You're eating God. And you say, wow, what an amazing magic trick. And that is M-A-G-I-C-K. That's God's magic. M-A-G-I-C is always sleight of hand. There's always a trick. You can learn to trick people with magic. But when you understand M-A-G-I-C-K, you see natural magic. You see God's dream manifesting in you, as you, and through you, and all of us. And so the goal is to get to where there's no it you love.
Paul, Maestro Paul, man, this...
When you spend your whole life looking into things, you figure a few things out.
Yeah.
And, I don't really think of myself as a maestro. I didn't do well in school, but I did ask good questions and get in a lot of trouble.
You figured out a couple things. Thank you, man.
I just have an insatiable appetite to know.
I know. I feel that. It's self-evident in this conversation, and I'm just very grateful for it. I know this conversation is going to be supportive to a lot of people. It has been for me. And also just thank you for the generosity of bringing books and the Tai Chi ruler and this coin. And I just feel the intentionality that we both put into this conversation, and I'm immensely grateful for you. New soul brother, you have me as an ally to support you in any which way I can. And just so thankful for you coming out today.
Hey, I brought you the gifts because I've seen enough of your podcast to say there's God doing what God loves to do. And there's someone who's really doing their best to make the world a better place for all living beings now and in the future. And I have to acknowledge and support that. And to me, love is a boomerang. So those gifts are love's boomerang coming back to say, I'm watching. Thank you. Aho, Great Spirit.
Aho, man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, and it's been a joy to see you.
Appreciate it.
Much love, brother.
Can't wait till you come to my house and
stack some rocks.
Let you have a little play in my garden and my library. And
oh, man, that sounds like my absolute dream.
See what the wild man's really up to.
I will be there. No doubt, man.
Yes. My podcast too is spiritgym.com. Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. It used to be Living 4D, but I changed the name to Spirit Gym with Paul Chek with the launch of Spirit Gym. And you've listened to lots of my podcasts. Yeah. It seems like I know you got all the books from the last one.
Yeah.
And that I broke into the public version, which is free, which is usually an hour to an hour and a half, and then the membership version, which is, I think, $7.99 investment for the month. And you know how deep I go in these things.
It's so deep. Yeah. If you guys want endless rabbit holes that will benefit your life and everyone around you because of the knowledge that you learn, Spirit Gym and the podcast and the book and everything we'll link down in the description, man. It's just
And that's at paulchek.com.
Amazing.
paulchek.com is kind of the place you go if you want to kind of get a general read on all the things I'm doing, from a blog to speaking, and it's just kind of like the hub. But myspiritgym.com is for the Spirit Gym program. paulchek.com's general. Chek Institute is my educational institute.
Thank you so much, Paul. Is there anything else before we sign off?
Just that I love you and I'm grateful for you and all the great guests you've had on, and your beautiful assistant, and the beautiful environment you've created here, and the great tea you gave me, and the great water, and just the what a magical share.
Man, one for the books.
Oh. See you soon.
All right, till next time. Be well, everyone.